The enormous throne room greeted the adventurers with a stifling atmosphere of inevitability emanating from the monster perched at the top. An ominous purple flame streamed through the empty eye sockets of the skulls, awakening an ancient nightmare from its slumber. The ruler, seated on the throne, loudly announced the beginning of a deadly game in which mortals have no chance. At his will, silent guards in closed helmets, bearing the seal of pure filth, emerged from the shadows. With a deafening roar, the massive bars cut off the only escape route, trapping the survivors in a death trap. With their blades drawn, blazing with otherworldly energy, the guards moved forward, showing no mercy. Sharp blades aimed straight at the defenseless group, depriving them of their last hope of salvation. Kim Tae-young, struggling to hold his wounded comrade on his shoulders, realized with horror that they were surrounded by primordial chaos. The survivors' gazes darted from the wall strewn with the skulls of past victims to the impending, inevitable death. Gritting his teeth in frustration, Kim Tae-young screamed, trying to get his panicking allies to gather their thoughts. But fear proved stronger than reason. People panicked and ran deep into the hall, saving their own lives. Every step they took was difficult, and behind them they could already hear the chilling whistle of raised weapons. One of the merciless warriors of darkness made a swift lunge, swinging for a fatal blow. A powerful shockwave swept through the hall, catching up with those running at great speed. The deadly steel caught up with the first of them, causing him to choke on his own blood in the blink of an eye. Splashes of scarlet blood shot into the air, staining the stone slabs before the eyes of his stunned comrades. Kim Tae-young froze in place, feeling warm drops fall on his face, erasing the last illusions. The realization that they could be here forever made him rush forward through the growing nightmare. But right in front of him a blinding, all-consuming light flashed, threatening to wipe all life from the face of the earth. A powerful explosion threw the exhausted people back, plunging them into the absolute chaos of this mad battle. The magical seal was released from the palm of the hand, causing the space to shake from the released energy. The shockwave threw him to the ground, depriving him of his last strength and ability to resist. Having barely come to his senses, Kim Tae-young looked around in horror, trying to comprehend the scale of the disaster that had occurred. A desperate, pain-filled cry burst from his chest, breaking the silence that hung over the battlefield. He struggled to his feet and looked around at the ruins, from which clouds of dust were still rising. A huge black obelisk stood silently in the middle of the scorched void, dividing the allies with an insurmountable wall. Lee Jong-jae stood with his back to him, his once immaculate suit now covered in soot and blood. Tae-young's gaze froze, filled with a silent question and growing anxiety for their future fate. It seemed like Jong-jae didn't even move, completely focused on the invisible threat lurking ahead. At that moment, an enemy with a shining purple blade fell from the sky like a punishing lightning bolt. But the protective barriers had already begun to awaken, responding to the emergency call of magic. Emerald beams crisscrossed the air, blocking the attacker's deadly thrust. The old ally screamed with tension, putting every last bit of his life force into this desperate resistance. The deadly shadow warriors continued to advance relentlessly, ready to tear apart anyone who stood in their way. They were approaching rapidly, leaving no time for reflection or tactical retreat. Realizing that this was his last chance, the old man unleashed the full power of his magic circle, deciding to take the blow himself. Tae-young watched with bated breath as his loyal comrade sacrificed himself to save the others. The wind carried away the ashes, revealing the terrible truth that no one wanted to admit. On the cold ground, showing no signs of life, lay the one they had so desperately tried to save from death. And at that moment, Tae-young's eyes reflected not just fear of the enemy, but a bottomless, all-consuming abyss of despair. The blast wave swept across the battlefield, sending tons of stone fragments into the air and blinding with its primal fury. Tae-young tried to stay on his feet, shielding himself from the ash and acrid dust flying into his face. But when the fog cleared, a terrible picture appeared before him, merciless, faceless guards silently celebrating their victory. On the ground, among the fragments of broken glasses, the last warmth of a once-living body slowly faded away. The enemy mercilessly trampled their hopes, leaving behind only lifeless ruins and cold blood. Tae-young looked around, refusing to believe that their entire squad had been defeated so easily. Everywhere lay those with whom he had gone shoulder to shoulder into this battle, comrades whose voices would never be heard again. His eyes were frozen in silent horror at the realization of the scale of this crushing catastrophe, and from the enemy's blood-stained blade, drops of fresh blood continued to slowly flow, signifying the triumph of darkness. The Dark Army raised its energy weapon, ready to mercilessly end the life of anyone who still breathed. The bodies of the dead were covered in gray dust, as if nature itself was trying to hide the traces of this brutal massacre. Death did not choose, it took everyone, leaving only a silent echo of former greatness. Left completely alone, Tae-young stood frozen face to face with superior enemy forces, seeing no way to retreat. There was not a drop of pity under the death helmets of the pursuers, only blind submission to their destructive will. The tip of the purple sword hovered just centimeters from his face, carrying a chilling inevitability. Tae-young's heart began to pound wildly in his chest, and his breath caught in his throat from the helplessness that gripped him. His gaze involuntarily fell to the trampled ground, where a barely noticeable detail gleamed amidst the chaos. It was a ring with a scarlet stone, an artifact that they had carefully kept for so long. The image of his fallen comrade who had entrusted him with this last hope instantly appeared in Tae-young's mind. But there was no time for grief, because the ruthless enemy was already raising his blade for the final, deadly blow. At this critical moment, Taehyung could hardly contain his rising fear, feverishly thinking about how to survive this carnage. Barely dodging another deadly blade, he rolled across the cold floor, narrowly escaping death. His fingers tightened around the ring, the very artifact that held his last hope. Gathering all his will into a fist, the young man resolutely put on the ring, feeling how the ancient weapon instantly responded to his call. The gemstone flared with a blinding scarlet light, spreading pure, primordial energy through the veins. The henchmen surrounding him raised their swords, ready to end the life of the impudent stranger at that very moment. But it was too late. A devastating blast wave erupted, blinding the enemies with its fury. From this raging chaos, a gigantic, eerie silhouette emerged, engulfed in ominous purple fire. The summoned creature's enormous bony hand fell upon the enemies with a crushing blow of unprecedented force. The Dark Knights were blown to pieces, unable to withstand this furious, otherworldly power. The huge skull froze in a silent grin, as if celebrating the easy victory of its new master. Taehyung stood in the midst of this madness, completely subduing the raging elements of destruction. A dangerous crimson fire lit up his eyes, indicating that there was no trace left of his previous weakness. Directing this crushing flow, he confidently made his way through any obstacles. Full of determination, the young man directed his unwavering gaze forward, towards the intended goal. Leaving behind him only the lifeless bodies of the fallen guards, he slowly walked along the dark corridor. All that remained in his path was a massive stone barrier, which crumbled into dust with a roar from one powerful push. Bursting into the spacious throne room, Taehyung unleashed his pent-up rage, instantly scattering the elite guards into the corners. However, the new defenders of the throne continuously swooped down from above, trying to stop the uninvited guest at any cost. But Taehyung only coldly extended his hand forward, releasing the deadly thorn chains of his dark magic towards his enemies. His blades cut through the air, leaving behind only crimson streaks of fallen defenders. Merciless magic tore apart the armor of the enemies one after another, leaving them no chance of salvation. Even the strongest stone barriers crumbled to pieces under the onslaught of his fury. Kim Taehyung moved swiftly like a shadow, dodging heavy blows and delivering lightning-fast counterattacks. But the onslaught of the guards did not weaken, and new ranks of warriors surrounded him from all sides, trying to squeeze him into a deadly ring. The guy instantly felt how the air around him suddenly became unnaturally heavy and icy. The next moment, the skies above the hall shook, and a blinding column of purple lightning crashed down onto the battlefield with a roar. A giant ghostly spear pierced the stone slabs, causing Taehyung to jump back from the powerful shockwave. He struggled to his feet and came face to face with an irresistible force that made him shudder. Taehyung froze, realizing that this was not a simple attack by ordinary guards. High on the throne, surrounded by sparks of deadly discharges, sat the king himself majestically. The king's chilling aura thickened as he casually extended his hand forward, concentrating colossal dark power. Just the mere presence of this man filled Taehyung with primal terror. The ruler's power exceeded all his expectations. As if obeying the will of their master, dozens of purple spears rained down directly on the defenseless target. Explosions shook the hall one after another, forcing Taehyung to rush about in a desperate attempt to avoid imminent death. The blast wave mercilessly threw it from side to side, turning the once majestic hall into ruins. The floor was crumbling underfoot, disintegrating under the impact of incessant flashes of pure destructive magic. A deafening explosion of colossal power illuminated the entire citadel with a bright purple glow, erasing everything in its path. Taehyung screamed in unbearable pain as the enemy's shackles began to literally tear his body apart. Exhausted and bleeding, he could only look helplessly at the throne, realizing the depth of his despair. A dark death knight, woven from pure hatred and violet flame, rose above the battlefield. His skeletal hand clenched, concentrating colossal destructive energy into one deadly point. Inevitable as death itself, the messenger of doom rushed straight towards his defenseless target. The powerful blow instantly threw Taehyung back, depriving him of any opportunity to defend himself or dodge. His eyes were frozen in primal terror in the face of this irresistible, crushing power. The bone giant, blazing with a crimson gaze, knew neither pity nor doubt. A deafening explosion of purple magic tore apart space itself, turning everything around into ruins. The weapons of the fallen warriors lay silently frozen in the dust, becoming a monument to this crushing defeat. Stepping on the fallen youth's chest, the monster raised his gigantic blade, oozing darkness over him. The monster's icy, soulless gaze foreshadowed only a quick and merciless end. Taehyung, pinned to the ground by the enemy's heavy tread, could barely breathe from the pain squeezing his chest. The darkness poured out in a maddening torrent, causing the boy to shudder in a desperate, throat-rending scream. Each new moment of this torture seemed like an eternity, finally erasing the hope of salvation. But the merciless energy of death only continued to thicken, ready to deliver the final, fatal blow. The enemy demanded answers, wanting to break not only the body, but also the very will of his victim. And at that very moment, on the brink of death, Taehyung's mind was transported to another dimension, shrouded in crimson fog. Before him rose a colossal figure of an ancient creature with huge horns, created from pure energy. The faceless giant gazed at him silently, as if weighing the value of his fading life. Finding himself in this mysterious space, the guy was surprised to feel that his wounds had completely disappeared. Looking around, Taehyung realized this meeting was his only chance to go back and rewrite his predetermined fate. Kim Taehyung looked with horror at the lifeless bodies of his comrades, drifting helplessly in the crimson sea of death. Those who yesterday fought shoulder to shoulder with him are now forever silent, taking with them the last hopes of salvation. And behind him, the gigantic shadow of a merciless executioner had already grown, eager to put the final point in this massacre. Alone, wounded and drained of strength, the boy stood silently under the bloody sky, awaiting the inevitable fatal blow. The Dark Lord raised his crushing hand, shrouded in the ominous flames of the abyss. The deadly swing was meant to cut the thread of life of the last surviving person once and for all. But at the very last moment, when the line between existence and non-existence was practically erased, a spark flashed in Taeyoung's eyes. Before his eyes, a blinding, pure light spread, from the depths of which an unearthly creature stepped majestically. It was Khazard, the great spirit whose radiance dispelled the primordial darkness and promised incredible rebirth. Taeyoung stood in awe, feeling the divine warmth once again fill his once empty soul. At that turning point, the ancient power of the contract awakened in his blood, causing the entire world around him to tremble. Meanwhile, in reality, the armored monster only cast a contemptuous glance at the fallen enemy. The monster's eyes, burning with hatred, anticipated an easy victory over the pathetic human offspring. The giant swung his arm for a crushing attack, ready to completely level the arena. Space shook from a violent collision of incredible power, raising thick clouds of dust. Fragments of former greatness flew in all directions under the onslaught of a destructive shockwave. However, through the veil of smoke, the monster suddenly realized that his triumphant attack had not achieved its goal. The monster stared forward in panic, not believing his own eyes and feeling the chilling fear gripping his mind. Right in front of him, Kim Tae-hyung rose from the ashes, engulfed in a raging flame of rage, his insane scream shaking the heavens. With every breath, his magical power grew at an incredible rate, marking the long-awaited birth of an invincible protector. Realizing that he has only one chance left, the monster decides to put all his remaining strength into one last crushing push. Enveloped in an ominous purple flame, he rushes straight at the young man, seeking to end his life with one blow. The space around is distorted by a furious wave of energy, ready to destroy everything in its path. The ancient warrior of death believes in his absolute power, having no doubt that this attack will be the final chord of the battle. A crimson fire of bloodlust flares in his empty eye sockets, anticipating a quick victory. But Kim Tae-hyung doesn't even think about retreating. He calmly meets the enemy's mad onslaught, holding back the blow with his bare hands. The creature freezes in complete stupor, not believing its own eyes. A pathetic mortal has blocked its most powerful attack. With a furious cry, Tae-hyung unleashes the destructive power pent up within, forcing his opponent to experience primal fear. A powerful crimson explosion shakes the arena, rushing as a bright column straight into the sky. The blast wave mercilessly throws the monster upward, dragging the fragments of the weapon with it and wiping out its former confidence. The wounded enemy lets out a heart-rending cry, realizing that the initiative has been completely lost. Tae-hyung, shrouded in thorny chains of scarlet flame, directs his gaze at the enemy hovering in the sky. There is no longer any fear or doubt in his gaze, only a cold determination to see this confrontation through to the end. Grabbing his giant blade, the young man unleashes a series of lightning-fast and crushing blows on the enemy. Steel scrapes against steel, creating blinding sparks and causing the very walls of the ancient arena to shake. The enemy is choking on his own rage, unable to contain the onslaught of the insolent man who dared to challenge him. Trying to regain control of the battle, the monster summons deadly spectral blades from the void. A torrent of purple spears and axes rains down on Tae-hyung, threatening to tear him apart. However, the young man only clenched his fist tighter, allowing the crimson aura to completely envelop his hand. His fist flares with a furious light, ready to crush any obstacle and put a bold end to this battle. Bloody claws tear through space itself, heralding the beginning of a crushing blow. The enemy's weapons shatter into tiny fragments, powerless before this primal power. A huge whirlwind of crimson energy rises upward, dragging the defeated enemy along with it. Inside the raging hurricane, nothing remains but the wreckage of the monster's former glory. The giant's ancient armor finally loses its power, floating in the epicenter of destruction. Bloodied but unbroken, Kim Tae-hyung looks forward, feeling his own blood respond to the call of battle. The huge, ghostly mouth of the crimson beast closes, absorbing the remains of the enemy's greatness. An incredible shockwave shakes the entire dungeon, releasing pent-up fury. With the final crushing blow, Kim Tae-hyung puts an end to this unequal confrontation. Meanwhile, outside, the unsuspecting crowd continues to vigorously discuss everyday matters. But suddenly, a colossal vortex of pure, unstable mana opens up right in front of them. The assembled experts freeze in shock as their energy levels begin to skyrocket. Anomalous activity within the dungeon instantly disrupts the usual laws of magic. Lee Jong-jae instantly realizes the scale of the disaster. An ordinary dungeon is transformed before his eyes into a deadly S-rank threat. A cold determination flashes in his eyes. He is ready to step into this hell even alone. The portal expands at an alarming rate, sending destructive lightning bolts in all directions. Those around retreat in panic, realizing that this insane force is capable of raising them to dust in a second. The space around is distorted, flooding everything with a blinding purple glow. Through the raging currents of energy, Lee Jong-jae and his comrades try to hold their positions. Staring into the unknown abyss, they realize that the world will never be the same again. From the depths of the blinding rift, overcoming the resistance of reality itself, a human figure slowly emerges. Exhausted and covered in blood, Kim Tae-young whispers with relief that this long and painful journey is finally over. But it all started long before this moment, when Kim Tae-hee-hung and other new recruits were just registering with the association. The tragic death of the former leader left a deep mark on the hearts of the survivors, causing the entire established system to tremble. In the headquarters, majestically towering over the city, the future of humanity was being decided behind closed doors. Lee Jong-jae and Cody Wood knew full well that if the terrifying truth about what had happened were to come to light, there would be widespread panic. They appeared before the head of the association, ready to defend their harsh methods to the last. Their cheeky grins only emphasized their superiority and unshakable confidence in their own rightness. The crippled old veteran sincerely thanks them for preventing the worst-case scenario, but this quiet office, bathed in soft sunlight, hid too many sinister secrets. The head is adamant that they cannot simply turn a blind eye to obvious inconsistencies in the reports. However, Lee Jung-jae only smiles condescendingly, making it clear that the situation is still completely under his control. Cody Wood coolly intervenes in the conversation, reminding them that the enemy's true strength is deliberately understated in official documents. The old mercenary listens carefully to this warning, feeling a sticky anxiety growing inside him. The tense silence between the allies is broken by the sudden realization there is no more time to prepare. At this very moment, the skies above the world are painted in crimson tones, marking the beginning of the prophetic eclipse. Gasping for breath from the onslaught of pressure, the defenders try to cope with the terror that grips them. From the crimson fog, the first hordes of indescribable creatures burst forth with a furious roar. A merciless avalanche of monsters rushes forward, ready to tear to shreds any resistance. And a lone warrior stands fearlessly face to face with this nightmarish army, accepting the inevitable mortal battle. Primordial chaos boils all around, and the bloodthirsty roar of the creatures shakes the very earth. Caught at the pinnacle of this madness, Kim Tae-young is horrified to realize the scale of the impending disaster. There is only one unanswered question pulsating in his head: how could he have found himself in the middle of this nightmare called the Abyss? But suddenly the blood-red sky split, and a blinding silhouette flashes in the center of the crimson sun. From the shining sphere, the mysterious chasm descends smoothly, enveloped in an unearthly pure light. At that moment, Tae-hyung felt as if the ruler of this terrible world himself had appeared before him. Hordes of demons rush at the intruder with furious squeals, ready to tear him to pieces. However, Hazard remains indifferent to their fury, and only serenely extends his hand towards the attackers. Just one light gesture of his palm is enough to release a crushing wave of divine magic. An incredible pulse of light instantly turns the nightmarish monsters into harmless ash. Tae-young watches in fascination as the field of a recent deadly battle is strewn with myriads of sparkling petals. The guy's heart beats wildly from the realization of what an irresistible force he just saw with his own eyes. The majestic figure of Hazard rushes back upward, dissolving into a column of primordial light. An all-consuming radiance floods the horizon, erasing both the abyss and the observer from reality, and only the mysterious, pacifying face of the savior is forever imprinted on his fading consciousness. With a sharp intake of breath, Kim Tae-hyung breaks free from the clutches of his obsession and opens his eyes wide. He finds himself in a hospital bed, breathing heavily and trying to stop the trembling in his entire body. The soft morning light coming through the window caresses his face, returning him to familiar reality. Could it be that all those monsters, the abyss and the mysterious god, were just a game of his tormented mind? But the beads of cold sweat on my palms and the phantom pain leave no doubt this vision was too real to be a simple dream. The echo of the mysterious Hazard's words, promising to wait for a new meeting, still resonates in his thoughts. Questions multiply with every moment. Where does this frightening power come from, which makes even dangerous creatures tremble? But there is only one answer. To survive and unravel this mystery, he will have to descend into the very heart of the abyss. The difficult battle with the Death Knight Lord left its mark, elevating him to the long-awaited B rank, and the sinister spirit of the defeated ruler became his new, most formidable and faithful weapon. With such an incredible speed of development, even national greatness no longer seems like an unattainable dream. But a sudden deafening roar outside the door of the ward instantly brings him back to harsh reality. Kim Tae-hyung freezes warily, wondering who dared to cause such a brazen commotion in the guarded wing. A slight shudder of anticipation of a new, unknown danger runs through the body. The door swings open, and Lim Aeong appears on the threshold, gracefully stepping over the fallen guard. A small, sly smile plays on her lips as she looks her new charge over appraisingly. Soon they rush away from the hospital walls, dissolving into the noisy flow of city streets. A heavy, almost tangible silence hangs over the interior of the luxury car. But Lim Manum simply takes charge casually, cutting off any unnecessary questions. Kim Tae-young stares blankly out the window, trying to process the rapidly changing events. He understands perfectly well that in this cruel world, no one will help without ulterior motives. However, his companion seems completely unconcerned by his cold suspicion. Tae-young directly states that he does not intend to believe in cheap fairy tales and expects sincerity from her. In response, Lee My-young only narrows her eyes mysteriously, clearly pleased with his insight and strong character, and while the sun slowly sinks behind the horizon, she opens the curtain of secrecy to him over the coming test. The third test, like the very first, will be a brutal test of survival in a maddened crowd. Lim Aeon says this with a slight, almost conspiratorial smile, as if anticipating the coming chaos. Kim Tae-young listens to her silently, his gaze directed forward, his thoughts preoccupied with assessing his own chances. Suddenly, the girl extends her hand to him, offering to form an alliance right here and now. This gesture makes the young man hesitate for a moment, weighing the pros and cons. She watches his reaction closely, trying to guess his true intentions from just one look. But Kim Tae-young still keeps his distance, reluctant to trust someone whose motives are not entirely clear. The tension in the cabin is so high that their silent companion in the back seat can barely contain his trembling. In the semi-darkness of the car, a heavy, ringing pause hangs, separating them before an important decision. Outside the window, the evening city slowly fades, plunging into the orange twilight of the departing day, and soon the night coolness envelops the quiet labyrinth of roofs and narrow alleys. Alone with his thoughts in the cold light of the lanterns, Kim Tae-young hopes for a peaceful respite. However, his solitude is interrupted. At the top of the stairs again appear those whom he did not expect to see so soon. Lim Aeong does not hide her indignation, angrily scolding him for being too secretive and stubborn. The young man only sighs in irritation, tired of the constant pressure and other people's questions. Realizing that she won't get his consent, the offended girl turns around abruptly, getting ready to leave. She leaves him with the bitter question of whether all members of the Nightwalkers are really so unsociable. But Kim Tae-young only watches her go with a slight, barely noticeable smile on his face. A quiet sigh of disappointment escapes the lips of Lim Aeong as she leaps, and he continues his journey into the darkness, knowing that in this game everyone will ultimately be left for themselves. Ricky Harley's walked forward calmly, confident in every step he took, but the silence of this gloomy corridor was mercilessly broken by a sharp, rapid movement. Someone's strong hand instantly covered his mouth, depriving him of the opportunity to make any sound. The guy froze for a second in surprise, trying to get a good look at his mysterious captor. From the darkness, Yu Aeong's eyes, full of rage and glowing with an otherworldly green light, looked at him. Enveloping them both in ghostly flame, she rushed upward, leaving no time for reflection. Kim Tae-young, who was left behind, rushed after him in horror, realizing that he would not have time to prevent the kidnapping. His desperate cry, full of impotent anger and panic, echoed loudly throughout the deserted passages. However, the prisoner himself did not even think of resisting, only smiling boldly and with anticipation. Ricky Harley's looked at the girl defiantly, as if this dangerous situation was just part of his plan. Yu A-yeon was momentarily taken aback, not expecting to see such brazen composure on her victim's face. His condescending smirk said without words that he was in complete control of what was happening, and this calmness made the formidable warrior seriously doubt her strength. Becoming even more enraged, she released all her hidden energy without a trace. At that moment, the sleepy streets of the night city had no idea of the coming shock. Suddenly, a colossal column of green light pierced the dark clouds, shaking the entire area. A powerful blast wave of magical flame instantly engulfed the entire space around. Pushing his way through the raging whirlwind, Kim Tae-young desperately tried to catch up with the elusive flash. But it was all in vain. All that remained before him was emptiness, and the realization that an irreparable disaster had occurred. For behind this fierce force lay the secret of a little girl who once bore the name Im Ayan. She grew up as an unwanted child, forever remaining in the shadow of other people's family happiness and false smiles. Years of loneliness have nurtured within her a mad, destructive force, ready to destroy anyone in its path. It seemed that no one could stop this anger, erasing the boundaries of human capabilities. There was nothing left in her eyes except the thirst to prove her superiority and make the whole world reckon with her. However, Kim Tae-young's mysterious power blocked her path, easily suppressing the onslaught of the raging elements. With one precise blow, he crushed her impeccable defense, forcing her to retreat. Lim A-young couldn't believe her eyes, feeling her own power turning against her. How could an ordinary person not only withstand the onslaught of an S-class, but also make her tremble with powerlessness? Kim Tae-young remained eerily calm, as if this battle was just a light warm-up for him. The realization of her own defeat paralyzed the girl, forcing her to step back. Every step he took brought the inevitable end of this short but emotional duel closer. Having crushed her will, he instantly closed the distance, depriving her of her last hope of escape. A slight smile of a winner, reveling in his triumph, crossed his face, and her rage gave way to confusion and inexplicable embarrassment that gripped her entire body. The witnesses to this battle froze in stupefaction, realizing that the balance of power in this world had just changed forever. But the real test lay ahead. The majestic arena was already ready to open its doors. It was here, within the walls of the gigantic Colosseum, that the outcome of the final round of the exam was to be decided. The stands roared with delight, anticipating the greatest spectacle that the whole world was now watching. Influential families and experienced masters stood frozen in their stands, searching among the contenders for future favorites. And while the crowd chanted his name, Kim Tae-young himself was preparing to create another sensation in front of the astonished public. In the stands, ordinary spectators whispered with trepidation and excitement because the harsh trials of the selection always concealed mortal danger. However, Tae-young's devoted fans had no doubt about his triumph, loudly declaring the unconditional superiority of their idol. Their fierce support literally burned with a flame of faith that none of the opponents could stand against this crushing force. The boisterous cries of the devoted fans made even random bystanders turn around, amazed by such frantic fanaticism. Amidst all this hustle and bustle, the young journalist desperately tried to concentrate, realizing that her career and future in the profession were at stake today. The mistakes of the past still hung heavily over her, and the cries of a disgruntled editor over disrupted reports echoed in her memory. Another failure, and a missed interview with Kim Tae-young threatened to become the final point for her, depriving her of any hope of salvation. But suddenly her attention was drawn to a sharp change in the mood in the arena, where the usual hum was replaced by an ominous premonition. The tension in the air thickened to the breaking point, enveloping the colossal dimensions of the stadium in an oppressive silence. The girl leaned forward in amazement, not believing her own eyes and holding her breath at the picture that opened up to her. All the fighters present, from seasoned veterans to ambitious A-rank newcomers, froze in indecision. And even the formidable Igmoon, famous for his inflexibility, could not hide his nervous trembling in the face of the impending threat. The gaze of hundreds of the most dangerous warriors was riveted on only one figure, standing motionless in the very center of this improvised cage. Hunters accustomed to fighting alone were preparing to take an unprecedented step, joining forces to eliminate a single enemy. The realization of this incredible truth left the journalist frozen in deep shock. But Kim Tae-young himself continued to stand there with a casual air, as if the crowd of rivals thirsting for his blood was just a minor obstacle. A barely noticeable predatory smile flashed across his face. The challenge was accepted, and he now dictated the rules of the game. With the first sparks of released magic, a desperate determination to strike first ignited in the eyes of the challengers. In a single, furious impulse, the warriors rushed into the attack, trying to crush the self-confident youth with superior numbers. And at that very moment, the arena exploded into a kaleidoscope of destructive elements, marking the beginning of a frenzied massacre that would forever change the balance of power. A powerful explosion rocks the stands, scattering the attackers in all directions like dry leaves in the wind. The fighters, in a panic, realize that they have underestimated the enemy and call on everyone to unite against a single threat. But their pitiful attempts to coordinate are instantly drowned out by a blinding whirlwind of primordial energy. Kim Tae-young moves at the limits of human ability, swiftly cutting through the ranks of attackers one after another. The faces of the recent favorites are frozen in wild, animalistic horror in the face of an irresistible force. Stone armor covers the young man's fist, and a barely noticeable predatory grin plays on his lips. The next crushing blow crushes another challenger into the dust, splitting the strongest slabs. Flashes of alien magic are extinguished helplessly under the onslaught of his rage, leaving his opponents no chance of salvation. New explosions rock the battlefield time after time, turning the prestigious exam into a one-sided massacre. The defeated soldiers fall unconscious to the ground, drowning in clouds of thick smoke in their own helplessness. Kim Tae-young surveys the fruits of his labor with the icy calm of a winner for whom this battle was just a warm-up. But suddenly, right under his feet, a menacing crack is heard, and an ominous green light begins to ooze from the depths of the slabs. A furious tree monster bursts forth, ready to tear the impudent troublemaker to pieces. Dense, elastic vines instantly entwine the young man's body, preventing him from making even the slightest movement. Finding himself in a deadly trap, Kim Tae-young looks at the living shackles that bind him with slight surprise. A new opponent slowly emerges from the shadows, smugly declaring that victory over the S-class does not guarantee anything. The green-haired mage points his finger triumphantly, confident that he is destined to be the true winner of this day. However, instead of panic, that same cheeky, foreboding smile blossoms on Kim Tae-young's face again. With one sharp, powerful jerk, he breaks the vaunted bonds and brings down a crushing kick straight on the head of the stunned enemy. A wild cry of pain echoes across the ruined arena as the opponent's last hope is mercilessly trampled. In a panic, the commanders give the order to go ahead, desperately trying to turn the tide of a clearly lost battle. Kim Tae-young only smirks condescendingly, making a defiant gesture with his hand and inviting them to commit one last stupidity. There is not a drop of fear on his face, only the cold calculation of a predator who has cornered his prey. Blinded by rage, the fighters, led by Lee Jong-jae, launch a mad frontal attack. Lee Jong-jae concentrates all his strength, hoping to crush this insolent upstart with one powerful blow. But the next moment his triumphant confidence is replaced by the chilling realization of imminent death. Right in front of him, a colossal ghostly figure materializes from the bloody haze, radiating pure death. A colossal bone entity mercilessly descends upon the arena, crushing any attempts at resistance into dust. A crushing wave of dark magic instantly scatters the attackers, leaving them to groan helplessly on the rubble of the slabs. The spectators in the stands freeze in horror, unable to believe the absolute superiority of this monster. Shock and stupor grip the crowd, which just a moment ago was thirsting for a spectacular battle. Kim Tae-young himself didn't even move from his spot, lazily lowering his hand after such a destructive demonstration. Even the most seasoned observers in the stands drop their popcorn, completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of its power. The air in the arena becomes so heavy with residual aura that it becomes almost impossible to breathe. The dust storm slowly clears over the battlefield, revealing a scene of one man's absolute triumph. With a sigh of relief, Kim Tae-young states that this minor nuisance is finally over. With a slight half-smile, he turns around at the sound of approaching footsteps, expecting a new opponent. Through the clouds of settling dust, the next fighter slowly makes his way towards him. Yoshikawa Surara, clasping his hands in excitement, stands hesitantly before such a frightening grandeur. Kim Tae-young gently suggests that she make the wise choice and surrender voluntarily before it's too late. Yoshikawa Surara hesitates, breathing heavily amidst the raging maelstrom, feeling her strength slowly fading. Kim Tae-hyung just smirked confidently, knowing full well that he was in complete control of the situation. But pride and stubbornness do not allow the young warrior to simply give up without a fight. At that very moment, a crushing stream of ice magic pierces the arena, trying to engulf everything around. Razor-sharp permafrost crystals rush forward, leaving no room to maneuver. A massive sphere of purest ice envelops the battlefield, turning it into a lifeless wasteland. However, Kim Tae-hyung remains completely unharmed, still casually holding his hands in his pockets. Realizing that this is not enough, Yoshikawa Surata launches a last desperate attack, raising his massive weapon. The tip of her fearsome ice axe glows with the bright light of primordial energy. With a furious cry, she swears that she will not make the same mistakes again and will carry out the blow to the end. The young man only looks into her eyes defiantly, amused by her futile attempts to turn the tide of the battle. There is a deafening roar, and the ice blocks shatter into tiny pieces from the monstrous collision. A snowstorm momentarily obscures the spectator's vision, hiding the participants in frosty fog. Only the girl's long azure hair rises into the air for a moment in the midst of this chaos. The silhouettes of the opponents rush past each other, and at that very moment the outcome of the duel is decided. The warrior's silent body collapses powerlessly onto the cold arena slabs right at the feet of the winner. Having lost her last strength, she sinks into oblivion, never having managed to surpass her formidable rival. Kim Tae-hyung exhales heavily, looking at his fingers covered in frost from this grueling confrontation. With a slight, respectful smile, he admits that defeating such a stubborn opponent was no easy task. And to the deafening roar of the stands, the icy fog over the arena begins to slowly dissipate. On the polished table, next to the shining blade, lies an official document confirming the incredible. The head of the association personally congratulates the young man on receiving the coveted and rare S rank. But behind this polite mask lies the cold calculation of a man accustomed to controlling the destinies of others. Kim Tae-hyung just calmly examines his new weapon, understanding the price of this recognition. The man opposite pauses heavily, preparing to make an offer he can't refuse. The young man instantly senses the change in the atmosphere, sensing the beginning of a dangerous diplomatic game. The question of joining the new Korea Players Association is directly raised, an offer that promises unlimited power. This turn of events takes Kim Tae-hyung by surprise, causing him to be momentarily at a loss under that intense gaze. His face reflects a tense internal struggle. Too much is at stake now. The old leader of the association watches silently, confident that he has complete control over the course of this meeting. Indeed, the world around us has changed too quickly, and the old rules no longer work. Now new, powerful players are entering the arena, among whom the unwavering Yoshikawa Surata stands out. Each of them possesses colossal power and their own ambitions in this new reality. But the chairman patiently awaits an answer from the one who is capable of upsetting this fragile balance of power. Kim Tae-hyung slowly reaches for his cup of hot tea, trying to buy precious seconds to make a decision. Taking a calm sip, he delivers an answer that leaves his interlocutor literally frozen in place in amazement. Not believing his ears, the stunned leader abruptly rises from the table, demanding an explanation for such a brazen refusal. But the young man only smiled mysteriously, not at all afraid of someone else's outburst of anger. Kim Tae-hyung calmly makes it clear that his decision is final, and no amount of pressure will make him back down. The chairman can only stand helplessly in the silence of the office, realizing that this guy is beyond his control. But instead of anger, a knowing, almost predatory smile suddenly appears on the chairman's face. He bursts into loud laughter, trying to defuse the situation and regain control of the conversation. Kim Tae-hyung just silently watches this performance, calmly sipping hot tea. Having finished laughing, the old man sank heavily into a chair, realizing that brute force would not be enough to get through to this young man. Kim Tae-hyung's gaze remains cold and penetrating, waiting to see what proposal will follow next. And then the chairman smirks again, deciding to approach the matter from a completely different, much more tempting angle. It recalls the country's greatest hunters, whose power and glory seem unattainable to mere mortals. About those who for years held back the onslaught of nightmarish creatures bursting from the depths of the abyss. About those whose power allowed them to wipe out entire hordes of monsters with just one wave of their hand. To stand alongside these legends, Kim Tae-hyung will have to endure the most dangerous trials. He needs to take a step towards the shining vortex of the portal, which hides unknown threats. The tension mounts, and even the experienced fighter's face begins to show a shadow of doubt in the face of the unknown. But this is how true strength is forged, in endless battles where life itself is at stake. Only those who have accomplished great feats for the salvation of humanity are awarded the title of national representatives. The chairman suggests that Kim Tae-hyung aim for this peak, although they both understand how thorny this path will be. But for Kim Tae-hyung, this challenge is just another step, and he steps into the lands teeming with monsters without hesitation. The ominous mana surrounding him swirls at his feet, as if trying to stop the intruder. No matter what danger lies ahead, his determination is unwavering, and a cold fire burns in his eyes. Without further ado, he rushes straight into the blinding glare of the gate, ready to take any blow that fate might throw at him. Meanwhile, in the silence of the night, shrouded in fog, the majestic mansion holds its dark secrets, awaiting the arrival of a new guest. Within these walls, the air literally trembles with violent flashes of destructive force. Muffled groans of pain are heard, drowning in the ominous crimson glow of anger. The influential Go Tai-wook, unable to contain his overwhelming rage, personally carries out swift and merciless judgment on his subordinates. Trying to beg for mercy, the unfortunate man only suffocates more and more in the grip of an irresistible magical grip. Go Taiwook is adamant. His mind is clouded by the thirst for revenge for the crippled heir, while the culprit of the tragedy walks free. With every word, his rage only grew, spilling out in a crushing wave of pure energy. A powerful blow throws the offender onto the cold floor tiles, shattering the expensive furnishings of the hall. The defeated subordinate falls silent, no longer able to resist the mad wrath of his master. At this moment, the doors carefully open and an excited assistant timidly announces the arrival of an unexpected visitor. The news that the mysterious guest has arrived from a mysterious guild leaves Go Taiwook momentarily stunned. A cold wariness flashes in his gaze. He senses the approach of a new, far more dangerous threat. A thick, dark fog begins to swirl behind the secretary, distorting the very space around the majestic door. From the impenetrable haze, a sinister figure, shrouded in darkness, emerges majestically and slowly. The mere sight of this uninvited guest makes Go Taiwook lose all his recent arrogance. The dangerous aura emanating from the terrifying armor with the skull emblem literally paralyzes the will of those present. Cody Wood, hiding his face behind a futuristic mask, gives the mansion's owner a chilling, confident look. Meanwhile, many miles away from this gloomy place, a shining spatial rift opens up in the middle of the peaceful sky. Kim Tae-young, returning from another dangerous raid, confidently steps out of the seething stream of energy onto solid ground. His gaze is focused forward, ready for any challenges this world has in store for him. But beyond the threshold of the gates, those for whom his return could change the entire course of future events are already eagerly awaiting him. The exit meeting turns out to be quite eccentric when a man appears in the crowd holding a sign calling for Kim Tae-young. His piercing cries instantly attract everyone's attention, breaking the silence of this important day. The young hunter himself reacts to such a greeting only with genuine bewilderment and silent awkwardness. However, this noisy guide represents the greatest organization, East Point, which controls colossal wealth. This place is famous for its impeccable service, rare artifacts, and elite from all over the world. Our guide doesn't hide his wild delight at such an important mission, literally writing Kim Tae-young's name on his forehead. On the way, they are met by stern and impregnable security, ready to stop any unforeseen threat. Strict security controls leave no chance for outsiders to penetrate through the portals. Watching this farce, Kim Tae-young admits that the level of security in this place is truly impressive, but behind the hunter's outward carelessness lies cold calculation and secret motives. After all, very soon this grandeur must tremble under the onslaught of an indescribable evil that will hang over the skyscrapers. Meanwhile, inside the auction hall, the main performance begins, accompanied by the loud cries of the host. A legendary potion is brought onto the stage, capable of changing the balance of power for anyone who can pay for it. Kim Tae-hyung watches what is happening from the height of the balcony, maintaining absolute calm and not revealing his plans. A serious battle is raging in the hall among the richest people, ready to give up entire fortunes for a rare lot. The young man knows that his true goal is not these trinkets, but the upcoming battle with the S-rank demon, which will bring him glory. Passions are running high, the stakes are rapidly rising, immersing the hall in an atmosphere of wild excitement. But Taehyung remembers prophetic visions of this majestic building being reduced to ruins by a terrifying monster. Distracted from his dark thoughts, he calls out to his returning assistant, who hurries to him with sweets in his hands. And this simple question makes his companion freeze in place in complete numbness, anticipating something important. However, the simple conversation is interrupted by a sudden sense of impending danger. The confused friends freeze, realizing that they are no longer alone here. From the semi-darkness of the corridor comes the synchronous, heavy steps of an armed detachment. The people around them step back in fear, trying not to even breathe in the presence of these people. The heroes are met by someone they never expected to see, the dangerous and unpredictable Go Taiwook. Surrounded by his loyal warriors, he approaches with the mocking grace of a predator. His haughty smile radiates a feigned friendliness that conceals deadly intentions. Taehyung and his comrade find themselves right in the path of this ominous procession. Just one look at the uninvited guest makes the partner go cold with the approaching horror. After all, Go Taiwook's reputation as a ruthless executioner who knows no mercy speaks for itself. With a casual yet authoritative gesture, he extends his hand to Kim Tae-hyung in greeting. The young man looks warily at the open palm, intuitively sensing a catch in this gesture. A moment of confusion gives way to surprise. Tae-hyung notices a strange detail in the outstretched left hand. However, it is too late to retreat, and their palms finally touch. At the same moment, the air is torn apart by a powerful flash of hidden magical energy. A devastating shock pierces through Taehyung, causing every cell in his body to shudder in pain. This is no simple handshake, but a brutal test of strength designed to break his spirit. Go Taiwook only smirks softly, watching his victim's torment through a veil of sparkling power. His face contorts into a mad grin of triumph as he continues to relentlessly increase the pressure. But Kim Tae-young doesn't intend to give in so easily, clenching his teeth furiously and preparing to fight back against this bastard. A sudden realization makes him freeze as his gaze falls upon something horrifying. Around him, innocent people begin to choke, falling to their knees from the enemy's suffocating aura. Kim Tae-young realizes with horror that any outbreak of fighting here will result in the mass death of civilians. The stakes are too high, and panic slowly creeps into his mind. He is forced to restrain his power, suppressing the destructive magic that is ready to burst from his fingers. At this moment, Lee Jong-jae only smirked mockingly, completely in control of the situation and enjoying someone else's weakness. Leaning closer, he whispers poisonous words, making it clear that he is the one dictating the rules today. Gritting his teeth in impotent rage, his opponent is forced to swallow this bitter insult. With a mocking laugh, Lee Jongjae loosens his grip, deciding to back down but still having the last word. He leisurely walks away, guarded by his loyal swordsman, leaving Kim Tae-young alone with his raging anger. Safely in the shelter, Taehyun tries to comprehend what happened while his companion watches him in confusion. But the guy's gaze remains cold and focused. This round is lost, but the war is far from over. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, in a skyscraper towering above the clouds, a completely different threat is brewing. At the entrance to the strategic sector, an elite squad prepares to defend the key line until its last breath. But from the depths of the corridor, an enemy is slowly approaching them, led by a mysterious stranger in a turban. The squad leader orders them to fight to the death, because behind them is the vital control panel for the warp gate. With their blades drawn, the defenders rush into battle, ready to crush anyone who dares to encroach on their territory. However, they underestimated the terrifying power of the attackers, who had unleashed a giant carnivorous monster. The first victims are not long in coming. The monster mercilessly crushes the defense, tearing apart the flesh of the unfortunate soldiers. And behind all this madness, the same old man watches with a reverent, frightening smile, offering prayers to his dark gods. But the old man is far from alone here. From the clouds of thick smoke behind him, a squad of armed men silently emerges. Their faces are hidden by masks, and their gazes are full of icy determination to fulfill someone else's sinister will. And as the fanatical priest completes his ritual, his eyes flash with an ominous crimson fire, summoning a monstrous force ready to tear this world apart with just its furious roar. They are the messengers of chaos, come to take back what they consider rightfully theirs. At the same time, in the majestic complex on the secluded island, life went on as usual, until a sudden, devastating explosion crushed the outer wall of one of the towers, marking the beginning of the disaster. Just moments ago, scientists and distinguished guests were calmly discussing new technologies at a closed presentation. But now the walls of the lecture hall are collapsing under the onslaught of a firestorm, burying all hopes of salvation. Those who were in the corridors did not even have time to understand what danger hung over their heads. The blast wave mercilessly throws people back, turning the familiar world into a living hell of flames and flying debris. A bright flash on the horizon makes it clear that this is not just an accident, but a planned terrorist attack. One after another, explosions rock the once impregnable citadel, turning it into smoke-filled ruins. Kim Tae-young screams in horror, unable to contain his panic at the nightmare unfolding around him. The building shakes from the incessant blows, and the frightened crowd rushes in all directions, trying to save itself. Finding himself in the very epicenter of chaos, Lee Jongjae realizes with bated breath that his escape routes are cut off. The deadly flames catch up with the fugitives right in the corridors, leaving no time to think. Operating on instinct, Lee Jongjae tries to navigate and lead Kim Tae-young away from the epicenter of the disaster. But an even more terrifying sight awaits them ahead. Through the veil of smoke, those same ruthless invaders are breaking through to them. One of the attackers fires into the air with a triumphant cry, enjoying the panic and helplessness of his victims. One of the attackers suddenly freezes, realizing that his own life has just hung in the balance. In an instant, his head is blown off his shoulders by one swift and merciless blow. Witnesses of this lightning-fast massacre fall into panic, unable to contain their cries of primal horror. The heavy footsteps of the merciless Punisher echo through the smoke-filled corridor, bringing the inevitable denouement closer. The deadly blade in his hands burns with an ominous crimson flame, thirsting for new blood. The terrified defenders retreat deeper into the vault, desperately trying to take up a last line of defense. But their pursuers had already cornered them, cold-bloodedly blocking their only escape route. At the head of this ruthless squad stands Cody Wood, whose chilling silhouette leaves no hope for mercy. There is not a drop of doubt in his eyes, only cold calculation and a readiness to step over anyone. A brief burst of furious fighting instantly turns into a one-sided and brutal massacre. One by one, the defenders fall onto the cold slabs, leaving behind only lifeless bodies. An ominous silence falls over the corridor, washed with the blood of those who tried to do their duty. Cody slowly reaches out to the treasured armored container for which so much blood was spilled. Finally, his fingers grasp an ancient phoenix-shaped artifact hidden in the very heart of the complex. The precious vessel instantly responds to the touch, beginning to pulsate with powerful, primordial energy. Cody feels this incredible, destructive force beckoning to him, promising limitless power. The insane, intoxicating thought of absorbing this power right here and now takes precedence over common sense. But the next second, the released energy goes out of control, causing a destructive explosion. A devastating blast wave sweeps down the corridor, mercilessly sweeping away his own subordinates. Dazed and disoriented, Cody Wood tries to shield himself from the blinding flash, realizing he has made a fatal mistake. Before the dust is even settled, the surviving mercenaries panic and realize that the enemy has already penetrated their shelter. One of the pursuers turns around in horror, feeling the chilling breath of death creeping up on him from behind. But he doesn't have time to react. A merciless blow hits him instantly, leaving no chance even to scream. The other accomplices freeze among the boxes, trying in vain to make out in the semi-darkness the silhouette of the one who so easily deals with their allies. The next second, 2 more fighters fall dead, struck down by an invisible and incredibly fast blade. Cody Wood stares into space, his heart sinking as he realizes his opponent is a master of stealth. Before he can even calculate his next move, a crushing stream of energy throws him back. A sharp pain pierces his face, and the spurting blood makes him let out a furious cry of helplessness. Trying to find support, he reaches forward, but the air around him begins to vibrate with a new threat. Ghostly chains rush down the corridor with a metallic screech, scattering sparks across the floor and making the survivors tremble. The magical shackles unerringly find their targets, depriving the mercenaries of their last chance to resist. The links tighten tightly, blocking the escape routes and restricting the prisoners' movements. This irresistible force permeates the entire space of the underground complex, subjugating the will of everyone present. Immobilized and suspended in the air, one of the opponents finds itself completely at the mercy of this devastating magic. The defeated invader screams hysterically, choking with pain and the realization of his own powerlessness in the face of superior might. Codywood clamps his bloody eyes shut, but a crazed, sinister grin suddenly appears through his clenched teeth. Directly above him, surrounded by crimson ghostly claws, hovers the very prisoner they considered an easy target. Lee Jong-jae looks down on his tormentors, his predatory gaze making it clear that the hunter and the hunted have finally switched places. Meanwhile, deep within the base, fallen guards lie, unable to hold back the onslaught of this primal force. And the terrified hostages can only silently pray for salvation as they watch the outcome of this nightmarish standoff. A whole horde of bloodthirsty creatures breaks free, ready to tear apart anyone who stands in their way. They fill the endless halls of the underground complex, turning the once protected citadel into a living hell on earth. This madness is observed from above by the one who directs the hand of chaos and revels in his own inviolability. He is confident that now the whole world will tremble, realizing the true scale of his master's greatness. However, the triumphant silence is interrupted by a frightened subordinate, rushing to convey alarming news. Barely containing the trembling in his hands, he hands the communication device to his master. He reluctantly turns around, annoyed by such a bold and untimely intrusion. A strange, frighteningly calm voice begins to come through the speaker, through the static. Every spoken word breaks the silence that hangs in the hall, foreshadowing imminent retribution. The leader's gaze instantly turns cold as he realizes who exactly dared to contact him. On the other end of the line, the confident voice of Lee Jong-jae sounds, not even trying to hide his triumph. Next to him, exhausted and bound by raging crimson energy, stands a defeated Cody Wood. Lee Jong-jae holds the precious artifact in his hands, completely controlling the situation and dictating his own rules. He coolly orders the enemy to appear in person and face the inevitable. This impudent demand sends the elder into an indescribable rage, causing him to curse the impudent youth. But the fate of this battle is already decided, and no threats can stop the coming storm. On his way to his main goal, Lee Jong-jae leaves behind only lifeless corridors and defeated enemies. To finally cement his superiority, he drains a vial of the most powerful elixir. Healing energy instantly fills his body, restoring his strength and awakening incredible power. Now, with this unprecedented source of power in his hands, Lee Jong-jae is ready to finish what he started. With a slight smirk on his face, he takes the last sip, feeling the wounds heal without a trace. But there is no time left for triumph. The stern Go Tai-wook appears in the corridor at the head of his elite squad. A horrifying picture appears before their eyes. The entire passage is strewn with the lifeless bodies of those who tried to resist. The soldiers stand frozen in indecision, looking at the faces of their fallen comrades and not believing the scale of the massacre that has taken place. The distress signal brought them here, but they were clearly too late. There was no one left to save. The people around Go Tai-wook are panicking and trying to comprehend what kind of irresistible force could have done such a thing in a matter of moments. However, instead of horror, a sinister, excited grin appears on the leader's face, and his eyes light up with a dangerous gleam. He understands perfectly well that the culprit of this chaos is still here, right among the ruins and bodies. Step by step, a mysterious and ominous aura begins to thicken in the air, causing everyone to hold their breath. From the clouds of dust emerges the one who single-handedly turned the tide of this confrontation, shrouded in a mysterious radiance. Faced with overwhelming odds, Lee Jong-jae shows no fear whatsoever. Go Tai-wook looks at the impudent youth appraisingly, feeling the overwhelming power emanating from him. With a hint of irony in his voice, the guy reminds those who arrive that their main duty was to protect this place, which they failed miserably. These words only amuse the powerful leader, who is used to looking down on any enemy. The tension between them is at its peak, and just one look reveals their readiness for an immediate fight. Lee Jong-jae takes a deep breath, calming the energy raging inside him and preparing for his next move. After all, what's at stake isn't just survival, but the prevention of a global catastrophe and the breakthrough of demonic forces that threaten to wipe this world off the face of the earth. The confrontation between the two leaders is inevitable, and the entire squad freezes in anticipation of the first crushing blow. Go Tai-wook slowly bows his head, anticipating an exciting game with the prey that dared to challenge him. And his frightening, dying smile makes it clear there will be absolutely no mercy for anyone in the coming battle. But even in the face of superior enemy forces, there is no room for fear or hesitation. The rapid collision illuminates the dark corridors with flashes of pure destructive energy. A deadly crimson web instantly entangles the entire space, leaving no escape route. Powerful discharges easily crush solid rock, turning the shelter into a death trap. Even heavy protective containers are lifted into the air by this crazy storm. Enemies are left in shock as his disguise falls away, revealing his true form as a predator. The enemy's sharp blade cuts through the air, forcing the guy to act at the limit of his reflexes. But it turns out to be almost impossible to avoid such a flawless and swift attack. A brutal blow hits its mark, drawing first blood in his furious confrontation. A powerful push throws him back, leaving behind only a thick crimson trail. And yet, contrary to the expectations of his triumphant enemies, this beast refuses to admit defeat. A true predator cannot be broken by such a slight wound. His true strength is only just beginning to awaken. A dark, ominous aura erupts, causing opponents to shudder in primal terror. A destructive whirlwind of crimson energy tears apart reality itself, sweeping away everything in its path. A merciless force crushes the bodies of those who, just a moment ago, considered themselves hunters. Cries of despair are drowned out by the chaos of a furious mental and physical storm that erases all barriers. The last defenders fall one after another, unable to withstand this otherworldly power. Lowering his blade, he coldly demands that they hand over his main target, leaving them no chance of escape. The death sentence has already been signed, and the survivors can only accept the inevitable, tragic end. But when it seems that the battle is over, a shining silhouette rushes from the sky, ready to deliver a crushing blow. Concentrating all his devastating power into one trusty blade, he prepares to unleash true wrath upon his enemies. But those who stand in his way are determined to hold the line until the very end. The regular patrolmen on the 30th floor don't even have time to comprehend the scale of the impending threat. The next moment, a blinding flash explodes through the concrete floors, sweeping away anyone who dares to resist. A golden beam of purest energy pierces floor after floor, rushing into the very depths of the complex. A triumphant landing marks victory over yet another obstacle, but it is too early to rejoice in triumph. The warrior's instinct tells him that something sinister is hidden behind the apparent ease of this victory. Looking into the broken abyss, he realizes that he has fallen into a carefully prepared trap from which there is no escape. The darkness of the deep abyss silently swallows up the remnants of former grandeur, hiding the true captives. There, at the very bottom, bound by strong chains, languish those whose fate hangs in the balance. The unfortunate scientists, deprived of all hope, wait hopelessly for their fate in the semi-darkness of the dungeon. Fear and despair are visible on the faces of each of them, because salvation seemed impossible. Even the mighty Cody Wood is now powerless, bound by the same unknown force and breathing heavily. But the silence of this confinement is broken by the appearance of Lee Jung-jae, who looks with cold blood at his defeated enemy. A slight, triumphant smile plays on his face, because the situation is now completely under his control. Unable to bear such humiliation, the captive explodes into a furious and powerless cry. Lee Jung-jae's response is lightning fast and extremely harsh. A crushing kick cuts off any objections. A knocked-out opponent flies to the side, completely losing the ability to resist. Turning to the frightened hostages, the hero warmly inquires about their well-being. However, we can't relax yet, because there is still a long road to complete freedom ahead. Bound by flaming chains among the rubble, the fallen enemy no longer poses the threat he once did. Bleeding and choking, he begs with his last strength for mercy and salvation. Lee Jung-jae looks at his defeated opponent with deep shock, not believing his eyes. Realizing that every second counts, the hero rushes forward. The heavy metal doors of the laboratory squeal open before him. At the same time, at the command headquarters, officers are calmly analyzing tactical data on the screens. But their peace is instantly disturbed by an elderly scientist running into the hall, having lost all composure. In a voice trembling with fear, he begs the military for immediate intervention. His pale face was frozen in genuine horror at the impending catastrophe. After all, right now, not only secret developments are under threat of destruction, but also high-ranking guests from South Korea. Cody Wood and the head of security try to quickly coordinate their actions in the chaos. But the scale of the threat goes far beyond the ordinary incident. Their enemy is determined and ruthless. The complex's leading scientist realizes with horror that the situation has completely gotten out of his control. The head of security desperately searches for a way to minimize losses, looking at the rapidly reddening sensor screens. And at that moment, the instruments detect something abnormal, causing everyone present to freeze in shock. Spatial gates open right in the most protected sector, breaking all laws of physics. The news of the approaching fearsome S-rank hunter, Kim Tae-young, makes the blood run cold. Cody Wood screams in rage, refusing to accept his impending defeat and powerlessness before this force. The tension reaches its peak when the confident and measured sound of footsteps is heard in the corridor. Turning towards the sound, they see in the doorway the silhouette of the one who will decide the outcome of this confrontation. A woman emerges from the bright light of the doorway to meet them, her cold and commanding gaze making everyone present freeze. The defeated conspirators find themselves bound by bright chains of magic, completely depriving them of the ability to resist. However, their leader, even when knocked to his knees, only smiles defiantly and madly. Lee Jung-jae steps forward, demanding answers from this fanatic who has lost all touch with reality. The prisoner proudly reveals his terrible secret. He summoned the powers of the abyss and made a deal with the true devils. These words sent a chill down Lee Jung-jae's spine, as the price for such madness was too high. There is no trace of remorse on the traitor's face, only pure undisguised delight at the chaos he has committed. A woman in a formal suit watches him silently, assessing the scale of the disaster they have brought upon this world. Meanwhile, at headquarters, looking at a 3D model of the besieged building, Command realizes that the situation has gotten out of control. Even the stern, eye-patch director cannot hide his shock at the scale of the impending threat. Advisors and scientists look at each other in panic, realizing that their vaunted defense systems will be useless. The old professor cries out in despair that the ancient evil has already awakened and its thirst for blood cannot be quenched. The mysterious guest's gaze becomes even more piercing, as if she had already made a difficult decision. But Lee Jung-jae refuses to give in to fear and decisively closes the distance with the madman. His fists clench with rage, and his eyes flash with an unwavering determination to end this here and now. The traitor only stretches his mouth wider in a mocking grin, mocking the hero's futile attempts to change something. For a second, Lee Jung-jae freezes, stunned by the madness pouring from every pore of this monster in human form. The triumphant cry of a madman shakes the walls, proclaiming the imminent arrival of a new era of darkness. Unable to bear this mockery, Lee Jung-jae unleashes the full force of his anger straight into the scoundrel's face. And outside, under the blood-red sky of the sleeping sun, the raging ocean beats against the walls of the citadel, which is about to become the epicenter of the end of the world. Deep within the sinister sanctuary, hundreds of defenseless captives find themselves trapped, surrounded by hordes of hungry monsters, and locked within a ring of flaming portals. This nightmare is directed by a mad old man whose single burning eye thirsts for blood and complete obedience. His minions, wearing creepy masks, silently await orders, ready to carry out any will of their master. Looking over the crowd of the doomed, the priest prepares to make the first sacrifice in the name of his dark deity. An ominous black smoke emerges from his withered hand, carrying with it the breath of death itself. Enveloping the terrified captives, this filth mercilessly lifts them into the air, depriving them of any hope of salvation. The darkness closes in on the defenseless Yue Yan's neck, cutting off her air and making her shudder in unbearable pain. Grinning sadistically, the old man pulls the unfortunate girl closer to his pedestal, reveling in her helplessness. Suffocated in the grip of the corrupting magic, Yue Yan can only watch helplessly as her life fades away with each passing second. The mad priest believes that victory is already in his hands and nothing can stop this bloody ritual. He raises his hand triumphantly, calling upon the abyss itself to swallow up the souls of the people gathered here, but suddenly the space around begins to distort, and a heavy, oppressive premonition of imminent change spreads throughout the hall. Even loyal guards are frozen in confusion, feeling their usual control over the situation rapidly slipping away. The tyrant's eyes flash with rage as he realizes that the sacred peace of his abode has been unceremoniously violated. Surrounded by clouds of dark smoke, he tries to find the source of the daring interference. At that very moment, Igman materializes out of nowhere like a devastating whirlwind, enveloped in the radiance of purest energy. Its blinding chains of light instantly bind the villain, punching a hole in his dark defense with an unbreakable blow. A primal horror appears on the priest's face as he realizes what an irresistible force has fallen upon him from the heavens. The divine spirit Igman does not give the enemy a single chance to come to his senses, continuing his furious onslaught. And the chains that bind him tighten ever tighter, turning the mad priest's triumph into his own inevitable destruction. The links of the golden shackles cut into the flesh of the mad old man with a dull, ringing sound, depriving him of the slightest chance of escape. The deadly dance in the air comes to its end when the chains completely restrict the enemy's movements. The ancient priest stubbornly resists, but the holy power inexorably tightens its ring around his exhausted body. A victorious grin lights up the young man's face, because this trap was set perfectly. The eyes of the monster in human form finally reflect a primal, chilling fear. But when cornered, the beast is ready to unleash its most dangerous claws, awakening the dark filth sleeping within it. A huge wave of heat makes the hero shudder, and the exhausting tension of the battle makes itself felt with the first blood. The priest calls upon all his demonic might, unleashing fiery serpents and colossal clots of all-consuming flame. A devastating explosion of colossal force shakes everything around, turning the battlefield into a real hell on earth. When the smoke begins to clear, only the blazing ruins of former glory are revealed. But through the raging fire, the ominous silhouette of the undefeated nightmare is still clearly visible. At the same time, the captured hostages watch the outcome of this brutal confrontation with bated breath. Their eyes were frozen in silent horror in the face of impending death, because there was no mercy to be expected. And the next moment, merciless chains begin to drag the unfortunate into the blinding whirlwind of the otherworldly portal. Lee Jung-jae, who witnessed this madness, freezes when he hears the ferocious, deafening roar of the bloodthirsty creatures. Hordes of grotesque monsters rush from the stands of the ancient arena like an avalanche, ready to tear apart anyone in their path. However, a devastating beam of light from the heavens instantly incinerates the front ranks of the advancing monsters. But the fallen are replaced by even more ferocious demons, thirsting for revenge and fresh flesh. A crimson seal flashes in the air, mercilessly cutting the attacking creature into pieces. And right through this bloody rain, armed with chains and a blade, a brave warrior rushes towards the horde. His arms quickly become covered in a strong stone armor, concentrating colossal force for the next blow. Like death itself incarnate, Lee Jung-jae descends upon his enemies from above, carrying the ominous shadow of a gigantic skull in his wake. But the horde of bloodthirsty creatures only rushes in to attack more furiously, filling the entire space around with a piercing howl. New, even more terrifying creatures of the abyss crawl out of the darkness, ready to tear the intruder to pieces. Their fierce eyes burn with primal malice, and their mouths emit a hungry roar in anticipation of imminent reprisal. Surrounded on all sides by a legion of monsters, the young man stubbornly fights his way through this endless living nightmare. Gritting his teeth and gripping his blade tighter, Lee Jung-jae frantically searches for a gap in the endless stream of attacking creatures. Meanwhile, the roar of a furious battle shakes the dungeon, attracting the attention of the one who is coldly observing this carnage. From the raging flames emerges the silhouette of a sinister lord of snakes, whose cold grin does not bode well for the hero. Fleeing from an enraged pack of pursuers, a warrior is forced to take a desperate leap of faith to face a new danger. Lee Jong-jae instantly finds himself in the heart of a nightmare, surrounded by bloodthirsty monsters hungry for his flesh. The first furious blow throws the young man onto the rocks, leaving no time even to defend himself. Strength rapidly leaves the wounded body, and consciousness slowly fades into a crimson haze of hopelessness. From above, an ancient and merciless puppeteer watches this agony with cold triumph, reveling in the suffering of his victim. At the same time, the bound captives watch in horror as a wave of monsters rushes towards the defenseless fighter. Despair was frozen in their eyes, because the death of the last offender meant inevitable death for them all. They frantically pray for a miracle, refusing to believe that their fate is sealed in this cursed place. But a sudden roar makes the prisoners flinch and look deeper into the arena. A swift silhouette emerges through the thick curtain of dust, ready to challenge the superior forces of the enemy. Through pain and beyond human limits, Lee Jong-jae rises again, crushing the creatures of darkness with the furious swings of his blade. The captured hostages watch the unfolding carnage in horror, not believing their eyes. They are chained to cold walls, doomed to be silent witnesses to someone else's madness. A tear of helplessness rolls down the man's face, seeing how fragile the hope of salvation is. Those who, just a moment ago, were full of determination can now only bow their heads in submission in the face of inevitable death. But Lee Jong-jae is not going to give up, turning every blow into a furious dance with death. The desperate cries of the hostages echo throughout the dark hall, calling out to those who remain alive. The chains, stretched to the limit, cut through the air with a piercing whistle, carrying colossal power. Even the demonic shackles that bind the captives begin to crack under the onslaught of incredible primal force. Straining all his strength, the young man accomplishes the impossible, trying to break the bonds and crush the enemies with one jerk. A mad scream of rage erupts from his chest as the centuries-old stone vaults collapse around him. People watch this madness in stupefaction, holding their breath in the face of an incredible will to live. Even the ancient Lord of Snakes freezes for a moment, amazed by such audacity on the part of a mere mortal. The darkness closes in again, giving birth to endless hordes of terrible creatures ready to tear the tired hero to pieces. But the hostages continue to beg him for salvation, because he is their only and last hope. The old man only grins haughtily, confident that this wounded youth is about to fall before his greatness. Bloodied, exhausted, but not broken, Lee Jong-jae responds to this challenge with a furious roar. The chilling gaze of the abyss pierces the battlefield, foreshadowing the inevitable outcome. But at this critical moment, a blinding light flashes in the depths of the hall, breaking the ominous semi-darkness of the arena. Through the opened passage emerges Cody Wood, concentrating all his magical power on his fingertips. With a thunderous cry, he unleashes a raging torrent of cleansing energy, ready to turn the tide of this protracted battle. Having bound the surviving enemies to their will, the arriving cleanup squad leaves them powerlessly begging for mercy among the rubble. Kim Tae-hyung freezes in place, stunned by the sudden change and the scale of the chaos that has unfolded. He hastily points out to his companion that these were people from their own escort who had fallen into a trap. Heavy footsteps echo throughout the dilapidated hall, adding to the already ominous atmosphere. Lee Jong-jae looks around gloomily, trying to comprehend the full horror of their current situation. There is tension in his eyes. The situation is getting out of control with every second. A nightmarish sight unfolds before them, captive allies, bound by crimson marks of submission, deprived of any hope of rescue. The realization of the enemy's cruelty makes the heroes shudder with anger and powerlessness in the face of this injustice. Kim Tae-hyung screams in panic, not understanding what to do with those they were supposed to protect. All eyes turn to the depths of the hall, where a colossal, almost tangible threat is concentrated. However, a cold, confident smile suddenly appeared on Lee Jong-jae's lips. He had already hatched a crazy plan. Kim Tae-hyung's brazen calm only made him more stunned, unable to believe his eyes. At that very moment, the space is torn apart by blinding azure summoning gates, shaking the very walls of the dungeon. From the raging flames of the portals, ferocious, bloodthirsty monsters will pour out in an avalanche. Enormous creatures fill the cave with wild roars, ready to tear apart anyone in their path. Even the ancient demons lurking in the shadows are stunned by the sheer density and power of this magic. The mad old summoner bares his teeth in anticipation of a swift and bloody massacre. A countless army of monsters rushes forward, merging into a single destructive stream. Darkness finally thickens over the battlefield, leaving no room for the slightest mistake in the coming confrontation. A powerful blow tears monsters apart, leaving them no chance of escape. But they are replaced by a much more formidable enemy, whose body is wrapped in poisonous snakes. This mad old man desires only one thing: to wipe the impudent stranger off the face of the earth. Chaos rages all around, and space itself is distorted under the onslaught of an irresistible force. The witness watching this freezes in horror, realizing that he has found himself in the epicenter of a real disaster. He can hardly breathe as he watches everything he believed in crumble. But in the midst of these ruins, bound by flaming chains, Lee Jong-jae stands proudly. His rage is held back only by chains, but even crack under the pressure of his insane energy. The frightened witness held his breath, afraid to miss the outcome of this deadly duel. Lee Jung-jae just grins coldly, because it is in this kind of carnage that he feels alive. The monster lunges forward, releasing its deadly snake-like bonds. His mad grin foretells nothing but a painful and imminent death. However, Lee Jung-jae only clenched his fists tighter, ready to accept this challenge. The witness of this madness clenches his teeth, realizing that the slightest mistake will cost them all their lives, and his fear is justified, because the fates of too many people are at stake. Dozens of bound captives look at their only savior with hope and horror. But Lee Jung-jae is not going to let them down, feeling true strength awakening within him. With one sharp movement, he brings down the red-hot chains on the enemy, causing a colossal explosion. His movements are swift, and his gaze is focused on only one goal, to crush the monster. The air trembles with the furious clash, the outcome of which will change the balance of power forever. The enemy, filled with rage, unleashes all his demonic power on the young man. His blows are crushing, and his fists are woven from the purest flame. From this furious fire, the image of a merciless dragon is born. A deadly stream of energy rushes straight at a defenseless target. Ricky Harleys tries to defend himself, but a powerful blow hampers his movements and sends him flying. The explosion sends tons of dust and rock debris into the air, shaking the entire hall. But the mad old man has no intention of stopping, summoning new nightmares from the depths of darkness. Ricky crashes into the wall, choking on his own blood from unbearable pain. The enemy triumphs, summoning a horde of terrifying creatures to end this fight once and for all. The exhausted young man falls to his knees among the ruins, and it seems that his fate is already sealed. The enemy looks down on him, reveling in his absolute superiority. The monsters surround the wounded hero, ready to tear him to pieces at the first command. However, overcoming weakness and terrible pain, Ricky slowly begins to rise. A cheeky, chilling smile suddenly appears on his wounded face, and this mad grin makes the old master freeze for a moment with a bad feeling. The young man stretches his hand forward, releasing the power that had been pent up until that moment. The air turns crimson as something truly colossal awakens behind him. The ancient scarlet serpent opens its gigantic mouth, eclipsing everything around it. The realization of one's own helplessness before this primeval power plunges the enemy into true horror. Surrounded by a raging whirlwind of bloody energy, Ricky Harleys finally reveals his true, terrifying face to the world. Clenching his fingers, Ricky directs forward all the pent-up rage, ready to tear apart space itself. A powerful wave of scarlet flame falls upon the mad old man who dared to challenge this primordial force. However, he only grins madly, joining his palms to cast a treacherous spell in response. Ricky freezes, feeling how reality itself is distorted around them under the pressure of someone else's will. Cold sweat covers the eyes, and deep down a premonition of something irreparable arises. Before the astonished young man's eyes, the enemy mercenaries begin to fall one after another, as if struck down by an invisible plague. Their bodies convulse, and dark poisoned blood gushes from under their thick masks. The darkness literally eats away at the flesh of the unfortunate, erasing their faces and turning them into dust right on the battlefield. Ricky can only watch this nightmare in silence, unable to stop the impending disaster. The exhausted old man sends up heart-rending prayers to the heavens as his life energy is reborn into a terrifying crimson vessel. The young man freezes, realizing that his dabbling in forbidden magic has awakened something far more ancient. A colossal emerald serpent bursts forth from the depths, its venomous roar causing the very earth to tremble. The creature's deadly maw opens, ready to devour anyone who stands in its path of destruction. The echoes of this titanic battle instantly reach peaceful city districts, plunging the metropolis into chaos. A blast wave of colossal force tears apart the walls of skyscrapers, showering the streets with a rain of glass and concrete. People trapped inside office buildings press their faces to their windows in horror, watching the end of their familiar world. Fear grips the hearts of passers-by, who understand that there is no escape from this fury. But in the shadow of the destruction, new squads of ruthless punishers are already moving silently, ready to cleanse the survivors. Hiding their faces behind masks, they bring only death, confident in their own absolute superiority. However, they do not yet know that the darkness itself is already stretching its deadly claws towards them, leaving no chance for salvation. Ordinary people, caught off guard, freeze in silent horror in the face of the impending catastrophe. Fear paralyzes the mind, forcing each of them to realize their own powerlessness before the inevitable. And at that moment, a crushing blow tears apart space, depriving them of their last hope of salvation. The fragile walls of the human shelter collapse like a house of cards, revealing a chaotic landscape. Panic finally overwhelms the minds of those who find themselves at the very epicenter of his madness. Through the smoke and flames, a creature of true nightmare emerges, a dragon engulfed in poisonous green fire. This monster rushes down the walls of a skyscraper, bringing with it nothing but absolute destruction. Ricky Harleys, who fell from a dizzying height, also flies into the abyss along with the concrete debris. From above comes the mad, triumphant laughter of someone enjoying every second of this carnage. This madman is sure that today no one will be able to escape his merciless wrath. But Ricky isn't going to give up so easily and become another faceless victim. Overcoming his fear, he activates his power, and the heavy chain obediently wraps around his hand. With one sharp throw, he sends the steel links upward, clinging to the saving support. The chain, stretched to the limit, holds back the fatal fall, taking on a colossal load. Ricky flies back into the building at high speed, breaking through the strong glass. The force of the impact sends him skidding across the concrete floor through thick dust and debris. He manages to group himself and dampen the dangerous inertia, miraculously avoiding certain death. Breathing heavily from exhaustion and pain, the young man tries to come to his senses and assess the situation. A fierce determination flashes in his eyes, fear finally giving way to icy focus. Through the broken window, he peers intently at the hovering enemy, ready for the final round of this deadly battle. Ricky Harley's freezes in horror as he watches the space around him begin to distort under the onslaught of an irresistible force. A terrifying bone dragon emerges from this mad whirlwind, dragging Kim Tae-young into the abyss of freefall. A powerful explosion shakes everything around, raising tons of dust and debris into the air, erasing the boundary between sky and earth. Tae-hyung is thrown back by a crushing blast wave, causing his body to shudder in unbearable pain. Realizing the gravity of his comrade's situation, Riki screams his name in despair as the monster prepares for its next strike. But Kim Tae-young is not going to give up. Overcoming the pain, he gathers the rest of his strength for a last desperate counterattack. Like a flash of crimson lightning, the boy rushes down, concentrating all his rage against the creature of darkness. However, the monster only opens its terrifying mouth wider, in which a deadly flame is already blazing. The concentration of poisonous green energy reaches its limit, ready to incinerate all living things in its path. A sudden awareness of the impending disaster that can no longer be avoided flashes through Tae-hyung's eyes. A deafening explosion of green fire lights up the night sky, consuming the top of a building on a secluded island. As the smoke begins to clear, a bone dragon soars majestically above the blazing ruins, with a silent rider on its back. The mad old man revels in his own power, looking at what he has done with chilling calm. From the height of his greatness, he looks down at his defeated enemy, pinned to a half-destroyed wall. Kim Tae-hyung finds himself completely immobilized by shining chains that mercilessly bite into his wounded body. The exhausted boy, coughing up blood, barely maintains consciousness, feeling how life is slowly leaving him. The echoes of the horrific explosion still reverberate across the raging ocean, marking the triumph of absolute destruction. The dragon freezes in the air, like a monument to inevitable death, obeying only the will of its cruel master. A barely noticeable grimace of surprise, mixed with deep contempt, appears on the face of the sinister old man. He steps forward and mockingly admits that he never expected to see his opponent alive after such a crushing blow. Entangled in crimson chains, Ricky Harless struggles to hold back the onslaught, feeling the enemy's magic restrict his movements. Every moment is given to him with great difficulty, and the awareness of the colossal superiority of the enemy only undermines his faith in victory. His own predator's power is barely enough to defend himself, making him wonder if he's facing something S-rank. But even in such a hopeless situation, he refuses to give up and forces himself to stand until the very end. At this time, the old man hovering on the bony creature looks down on him as he tries to escape in vain. Ricky wheezed heavily, feeling how the enemy's suffocating aura gradually deprived him of the ability to breathe normally. The huge dragon, at the first sign from its master, rushes into a dive, ready to tear apart its prey. The old man grins in a mad grimace, anticipating a quick triumph over his defeated enemy. The young man realizes with growing anxiety that it will no longer be possible to avoid a direct confrontation. With a wild cry, the mad old man unleashes a colossal wave of pure, destructive magic. The green flame rushes forward, sweeping away all barriers in its path. A huge snake rushes through clouds of dust, heading towards the city blocks. Ricky can only scream in horror, realizing what a disaster is unfolding right before his eyes. Meanwhile, in the windows of a nearby office center, frightened employees notice a monster approaching. The faces of people are frozen with a primal fear of impending doom, from which there is no escape. The bone dragon crashes into the glass wall of a skyscraper at high speed. The walls of the building collapse violently, sending tons of concrete rubble and debris into the air. The lights of a vast metropolis illuminate the night sky as a massive tragedy unfolds in the heart of the city. Headquarters issues an emergency alert, calling for the immediate deployment of all reserve forces. And while chaos reigns in the streets, the best fighters line up in front of the shining gates, ready to step into the unknown. At the control center, they panic and record an incredible surge of mana, not believing their own eyes. A massive spatial rift opens up right in front of them, threatening to swallow the entire headquarters. But the realization of the scale of the disaster comes too late. The situation is completely out of control. At this critical moment, elite units move to the epicenter, ready to take the inevitable blow. The commander shouts orders, trying to drown out the growing roar of the yawning abyss. The lives of their comrades are at stake, and to save them, they are ready to go to the very end, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, on the front lines, a real hell had already broken loose, crushing concrete and sweeping away the defenders. The wounded fighters, unable to withstand such a crushing force, fall to the ground one after another. Those who are still standing can only watch the unfolding nightmare through pain and tears. Another burst of crimson energy tears through the space, turning the battlefield into ruins. A powerful blast wave throws back the last defenders, erasing all hope of salvation. Overcome in terrible pain, one of the survivors screams out his comrade's name in horror. Kim Tae-hyung, gathering all his strength, rises from the ashes in the path of the approaching darkness. But the enemy summons a monstrous creature, a colossal bone dragon that crushes the heavens. An ancient monster spews out poisonous green flames, ready to burn all living things to the ground. And behind his back, a sinister old man laughs madly, reveling in his absolute superiority. Kim Tae-hyung takes the crushing blow himself, erecting a barrier to save the survivors. The allies can only call out to him in despair, realizing the inhuman price he has to pay. The bone lizard once again spews deadly streams of energy, seeking to finally break the resistance, and the mad enemy personally rushes into the attack to destroy the daring people once and for all. Finding himself under a crushing hail of enemy blows, Kim Tae-young tries with all his might to stay on his feet. Primordial chaos rages all around, where streams of pure destructive magic collide. Overcoming the wild pain, the young man screams in helplessness, realizing that his body is already at its limit. There is only one desperate thought beating in his mind: how to save his comrades before it is too late. Ricky Harley watches the carnage in shock, unable to do anything to help his friend. Another flash makes Kim Tae-young turn around sharply to face a new threat. The dust gradually settles, revealing the horrific consequences of this merciless collision. The guy's gaze catches sight of his wounded allies who can no longer continue this battle, and at that very moment of despair, a mysterious calling whisper suddenly resounds in his head. An unknown force awakens within his chest, declaring a forced change in his true nature. A fierce heat pierces the body as ancient barriers crumble and the limits of its capabilities are exceeded. The Predator skill is rapidly evolving, crossing the line beyond and reaching S rank. But the mad evolution does not stop, raising his rage to an unprecedented level of double S. From the height of his greatness, the sinister old man directs the bone serpent straight at the madman who dared to challenge him. In his dead eyes burns only a thirst for blood and absolute confidence in his imminent victory. The colossal monster swoops down, ready to finally wipe the rebel off the face of the earth. But Kim Tae-young can no longer be stopped. He is engulfed in a gigantic column of crimson energy that cannot be undone. A soul-rending scream echoes through the ruins as this transcendental power begins to literally melt him from the inside. In the blinding radiance of space, the majestic Igman appears before him, a silent witness to his desperate choice. And while his flesh is bursting at the seams, Kim Tae-young understands that he is ready to pay any price for this victory. Red sparks tear through flesh, and the contract's insane energy begins to burst forth, erasing the boundaries of human capabilities. Kim Tae-young screams in unbearable pain as his body becomes covered in glowing cracks, ready to shatter into pieces at any moment. But, gathering the remnants of his fading consciousness, he directs all this destructive force into one single, decisive blow. A violent flash of crimson light cuts through space, unleashing primordial chaos capable of crushing even the gods. The force of this explosion proved too great. The young man falls dead onto the cracked ground, having completely exhausted his life force. The ancient master stands frozen in mute amazement, unable to believe that an ordinary mortal could overcome the limits of the system itself. The surrounding world trembles from the echoes of this unimaginable power, painting everything around in ominous, bloody tones. In the midst of the raging whirlwind, only the motionless body of the one who dared to challenge fate remains. The human vessel simply couldn't withstand the colossal overload, plunging Kim Tae-young into deep darkness. Realizing that his young opponent has been defeated by his own stupidity, the old man decides to end this confrontation once and for all. He calls upon the full might of his faithful bone dragon, preparing to deal a crushing blow to his defenseless enemies. The monster's deadly breath rushes down, threatening to scorch the very earth and take the last crumbs of life from the survivors. The dragon's gigantic claws cut through the air, leaving no chance of salvation for those remaining below. But this furious attack suddenly encounters an insurmountable obstacle, forcing the huge beast to retreat. The old warrior peers into the clouds of dust in surprise, realizing that the battle is far from over. From the height of his flight, he sees a figure that dared to stand in his way and accept this unequal fight. Cold sweat breaks out on his face as he feels the chilling aura emanating from his opponent. The skies above them are torn apart by a new surge of incredible, suffocating energy, eclipsing all living things. A gigantic monster rises from the crimson mist, its colossal silhouette instantly eclipsing the summoned dragon. Its deafening roar shakes the ruins, heralding the beginning of a true nightmare before which even death itself will retreat. The old man rushes downwards, driven by blind rage and the remnants of his once great strength, but his opponent only looks with disdain at this pathetic attempt to rise to the level of a deity. The enemy's cracked face lights up with a sinister grin. For him, this fight has long since turned into a boring game. The ancient master attempts to awaken hidden reserves by enveloping his body in thunderous discharges of dark energy. However, even through this destructive power, a chilling fear of the true monster standing in front of him emerges. The opponent slowly raises his hand, concentrating a colossal amount of crimson energy directly into his palm. The space around begins to melt from the unbearable heat of the released magic. A merciless verdict flies from his lips, predicting the enemy's inevitable and quick death. The old man's dilated pupils are filled with the realization of his own doom and powerlessness before a superior fate. Furious flashes of scarlet flame instantly tear his defenses to pieces, leaving no chance. Even the gigantic bone dragon beneath his feet is unable to save its master from a crushing fall. A blast wave of incredible power finally wipes out the last traces of their resistance from the face of the earth. Meanwhile, in the middle of endless, silent darkness, Ricky Harley finds himself locked alone with an unknown threat. The guy feels an invisible pressure building in the air, causing his heart to beat wildly. Suddenly, red-hot ghostly chains whistle out of the impenetrable darkness. Before the young man can do anything, the bonds tightly restrict his movements, depriving him of freedom. A hail of heavy rock fragments charged with deadly magic falls from above upon the defenseless captive. A powerful blow crushes his body into the ground, raising clouds of thick dust and destroying everything around. With difficulty suppressing a groan, Ricky Harless realizes with horror that the enemy has used a combination of stone skin and deadly poison against him. And from the darkness, new ghostly hands are already reaching out to him, ready to finally take away his fading life. The huge crimson silhouette of the demonic lord crashes down on the chained hero like a crushing wave. The realization of one's own powerlessness paralyzes the mind, while the enemy mercilessly absorbs the last drops of his magical energy. A chilling laughter echoes across the battlefield as a crimson abyss prepares to swallow the remnants of his consciousness. Ricky Harless, bound in flaming chains, listens in horror to a mocking question about the nature of his great powers. The demonic grin draws ever closer, taking away the abilities of others without a drop of regret. The final verdict is merciless. The enemy intends to erase his name from this world forever. The monster's massive mouth closes over the fallen body, unleashing a destructive torrent of primordial chaos. In the last seconds before falling into oblivion, a grimace of pure primal fear freezes on his face. A flash of blinding white light engulfs everything around, interrupting this nightmarish agony. With a shuddering breath, Kim Tae-hyung jumps out of bed, trying to throw off the shackles of this terrible vision. He looks at his palms in fear, still feeling the phantom pain from the chains that were squeezing him. But there is not a single scratch on his body, and the fatal wounds received in the brutal battle have disappeared without a trace. An unexpected guest strolls into the room holding a bag of fresh street food. Hunter Park Sung-jin appears surprisingly calm and even cheerful, despite the recent tragedy. He fills the entire table with delicious fast food, turning the sterile ward into a place for friendly get-togethers. Sitting by the huge panoramic window, the guest explains that these luxurious apartments were allocated by the association itself. Chewing on the delicacy, he calmly talks about the cunning traps of the demons into which they so foolishly fell. Tae-young listens to him thoughtfully, trying to cope with the strange feeling of déjà vu and disturbing thoughts. Meanwhile, on the hologram screen, reports are playing of inconsolable fans sincerely mourning their hero. But Sung-jin only smiles mischievously because the doctors were unable to find any traces of the deadly poison in his body. Waking up in a hospital room, Ricky Harless stares at his own palms for a long time, unable to believe that he is still alive. His mind frantically clings to elusive fragments of memory, trying to comprehend what incredible force saved him on that fateful day. The silent guest in dark glasses sitting opposite only adds tension to this oppressive silence. Ricky tries to explain that he only remembers flashes of monstrous power that changed the entire course of the battle. Their shadows hover silently on the floor as the heavy truth of the events that took place in the heart of the ruined dungeon hangs in the air. Then, amidst the ruins and clouds of dust, the survivors could only crawl helplessly over the bloody stones. After all, right before them, from the chaos of battle, a true monster in the flesh appeared, radiating an ominous crimson energy. His wounded silhouette with flaming scarlet hair inspired a primal, limb-numbing horror. The witness who was watching this could not believe his eyes. Kim Tae-hyung was standing in front of him, but at the same time, it was a completely different alien creature. The one they knew as a loyal ally now looked at the world through the eyes of a merciless executioner. The witness's gaze froze in silent horror as he realized the inevitability of his death. A fury of primordial flames erupted around the unknown creature, erasing any hope of salvation. The exhausted man fell to his knees, capable only of uttering quiet, incoherent pleas for mercy. But the merciless aura of ancient evil knew no mercy, forcing him to choke on his own blood. A second later, it was all over, and only this silent harbinger of destruction remained standing on the battlefield. Looking down at its flaming hands, the creature felt with obvious disappointment how the summoned power was beginning to rapidly fade. His new vessel proved too weak to hold such colossal power for long. Realizing that time is running out, the mysterious guest decides to retreat immediately, but before disappearing into oblivion, he turns his gaze to the unconscious young man. It was there, amid the rubble of a former battle, that a wounded Ricky Harless took his first step towards a new, frightening destiny. Rescuers arrive at the scene of the tragedy too late, when the dust of the battle has already begun to settle. A desperate cry is heard from the ruins. Kim Tae-young lies breathless, and his comrade tries in vain to bring him back to life. All around lies a picture of total chaos, where survivors desperately search for survivors. However, the reality is harsh. Most of those who took this crushing blow will never rise again. The realization of an irreparable loss squeezes the chest, forcing one to helplessly curse what happened. Kim Tae-young, whose kind smile once warmed those around him, now stood silently, taking his secrets to the grave. The scale of destruction is staggering. Once majestic buildings have been reduced to piles of charred concrete. Sometime later, within the walls of a quiet hospital room, Ricky Harless comes to his senses, stunned and lost. Opposite him sits the same surviving ally, ready to tell the bitter truth about what happened. The young man clutches his head convulsively, unable to believe the terrible news about the death of his comrades. The horror of what he had experienced grips his body, and terrifying images of the disaster keep appearing before his eyes. His trembling fingers grip the furniture as if it were the only thing that kept him in control. Having finished his difficult story, the interlocutor wishes him a speedy recovery and quietly leaves the room. Left alone, Ricky falls into deep thought, trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. He cannot believe that those who everyone is so panicky afraid of are really behind this monstrous incident. An image of a giant stone hand, shattering into pieces under the onslaught of an unknown force, flashes through his mind. Suddenly, a wave of crimson sparks runs through his body, causing the young man to flinch in surprise. But the mysterious phenomenon immediately ceases when a rustling sound is heard at the door again. A familiar voice informs him that another, extremely unexpected visitor has come to see him. Ricky slowly looks up at the newcomer, frozen in silent shock. Yoshikawa Surara appears at the threshold of the ward, holding a heavy basket of ripe fruit. Ricky can't believe his own eyes, stunned by such an unexpected visit from the one he least expected to see here. Her gaze remains focused and cold, as if she had come not to visit a sick person, but to carry out another important mission. Outside the window of the ward, a huge metropolis spread out, shining in the rays of the sun, living its usual bustling life. Trying to smooth over the awkwardness, the guy hurries to offer his guests some modest treats that he bought shortly before. But Surara, without further ado, slams his basket down on the table, nearly knocking everything else down. Ricky is literally speechless at such unceremoniousness, cowering fearfully in his chair. A heavy silence falls, and the young man timidly tries to assure her that his health is no longer in danger. The girl slowly takes an apple from the basket, turning the conversation to rumors of his incredible heroism during the recent terrorist attack. Ricky just looks away in embarrassment, not knowing how to react to such an unexpected recognition of his merits. Yoshikawa Surara continues to list his feats, mentioning that he single-handedly defeated 2 S-rank opponents. Ricky is at a loss under such pressure, not understanding where she got such precise details of their recent battle. However, her admiration instantly turns to rage, and the girl clenches her fist in anger, turning the ripe apple into spray. The stunned young man freezes in place, trying to understand why his face is now covered in sticky pieces of fruit. Realizing that she had gone a bit overboard with her emotions, Yoshikawa awkwardly tries to justify herself by changing the topic to a regular friendly visit to a sick person. But inside her, anxiety grows stronger as she remembers Kim Tae-young's incredible power. Looking at the seemingly perfectly healthy guy in front of her, she begins to doubt whether he really needed hospitalization at all. Moreover, a crushing, almost tangible crimson aura of monstrous energy suddenly begins to emanate from Ricky's figure. The girl realizes with horror that the gap in her capabilities has not only not diminished since the last test of strength, but has become truly insurmountable. The realization of her own weakness in the face of this colossal power makes her heart freeze in her chest with fear. But a sudden, sharp bang from the door opening instantly shatters the fragile silence, causing Ricky Harless and Yoshikawa Surara to jump in surprise. In the ensuing silence, leisurely, confident steps begin to sound clearly. Like a harbinger of impending chaos, a mysterious figure silently appears on the threshold. Ricky instantly senses something is wrong, realizing that the situation is taking a completely unexpected turn. Surara freezes in complete shock, not believing his own eyes and barely holding back a cry of genuine indignation. Before them, Yue Yun appears in all her glory, lazily leaning against the wall with an air of absolute superiority. Her calm, slightly surprised gaze slowly glides over the boys' stunned faces. However, the momentary confusion quickly gives way to anger, and Surara immediately demands to know what this person is doing in Kim Tae-hyung's house. The tension quickly rises as the worried girl tries to figure out how the uninvited guest got the secret code to the door. But instead of making excuses, Yue Yun just leans closer conspiratorially, breaking into her usual teasing and sly smile. Yoshikawa Surara stands frozen in mute shock while Kim Tae-hyung looks from one guest to the other in confusion, not understanding what is happening. But Yue Yun only smirked mysteriously, clearly planning another prank that would throw everyone off balance. Before the guy can even blink, her thin fingers tightly grab his wrist. This bold gesture completely leaves Surara speechless, causing her to blush deeply in surprise. Unceremoniously pressing herself against Kim Tae-young from behind, the temptress makes his heart beat faster from such intimate proximity. Surara's patience instantly snaps and she rushes forward in rage, ready to put an end to this outrage by force. However, Yue Yun only continues her dangerous game, gently lifting the guy by the chin and looking straight into his soul. Mad with jealousy and anger, Surara screams Kim Tae-young's name at the top of her voice, demanding that the sparks be stopped immediately. And the guy really finds the strength in himself to make a decisive gesture, sharply pulling his hand out of the persistent captivity. This time, it was Yue Yun herself who was surprised, as she clearly did not expect such a firm and cold rebuff from him. Ricky Harless remains wary, his gaze darting around trying to anticipate his interlocutor's next move. Yue Yun just shakes her head in displeasure, quietly complaining about his unbearable rudeness and inability to behave with ladies. However, the guy is not going to back down, ready to defend his personal boundaries to the end. Then the girl decides to approach him from a different angle, reminding him of the upcoming Asian-friendly tournament. She persistently pushes him to think that participation in his competition is his only chance to take the coveted 5th place and become an official representative. With a sly grin, Yue Yun closes the distance again, like a predator who has confidently cornered its prey. Ricky shudders at such assertiveness, feeling how her closeness and unshakable confidence literally suppress his will. On the sunlit rooftop, their confrontation pauses for a moment, leaving only an awkward and tense silence. Meanwhile, far from here, under the cover of the stormy night darkness, a lone boat silently approaches the abandoned island. Aboard the ship, ominous masked figures loom, led by Cody Wood, whose violet eyes gleam coldly in the darkness. His comrades silently peer at the outlines of the destroyed buildings, realizing that there is no turning back. Cody Wood himself remains absolutely calm, completely confident in the success of his secret operation. Through the slits of his massive mask, only a chilling, determined gaze can be seen, which does not bode well for his enemies. But suddenly, the silence of the night is broken by the blinding light of the searchlights of a military cruiser approaching close. A stern order to surrender to the authorities immediately is broadcast over the waves over the loudspeaker. The commander of the government detachment is completely confident of his triumph, angrily shouting demands into a megaphone. However, his confidence is instantly replaced by primal terror when the calm water beneath the ship suddenly explodes with a directed stream of energy. A powerful hydraulic shock literally tears the ship apart in a split second, dragging the surprised soldiers into the abyss. In the seething, cold whirlpool, people and pieces of equipment fly head over heels, helplessly sinking to the very bottom. Thus, without even having time to fire a single shot, the entire fleet of pursuers disappears without a trace into the dark sea abyss. A lonely ship rushes into dark, unknown depths, leaving behind the familiar world. Those who remain on board freeze under the weight of an unknown, overwhelming will that has shackled space itself. Hostile eyes are already set on a new target, and the name of Kim Tae-hyung is ignited in the minds of dangerous ill-wishers. A burst of colossal destructive energy marks the beginning of global upheavals, the echoes of which reach as far as the land itself. At the same time, in the very heart of the protected complex, hidden among the majestic mountains, something grand is being prepared. The walls of the base shake with the enthusiastic cries of hundreds of people welcoming their new leader. From the podium, the name of the man who has become the new hope and rising star of all of South Korea is announced, Kim Tae-hyung. This resounding triumph seems entirely deserved after everything he has been through. Standing beside him, sharing this moment of glory, is his faithful and powerful ally, whose gift exceeded all expectations. Until the very end, the guy couldn't believe that he would receive such a generous reward, the official right to clear the legendary gates. Ahead of them lies the formidable Temple of Fire, an anomalous double dungeon blazing with a cold, otherworldly flame. In a past life, this raid turned into a real disaster for the Nightwalkers Guild, taking the lives of almost all of their allies. But this time, fate gives them a chance to rewrite history by uniting the best warriors under their banner. The power lurking in Taehyung's hands is eager to burst forth, ready to crush any obstacles on the path to victory. The presence of the unrivaled S-rank hunter Yan instills unshakable confidence in the upcoming success, and the fierce support of loyal comrades ignites a fierce flame of determination in the hearts of the fighters. Taehyung himself is well aware of the full weight of responsibility that lies on his shoulders for the lives of these people. Looking at the jubilant crowd, he mentally swears that this time none of them will die in the darkness of the dungeon. After watching the support squad wish them an easy journey, the hunters take their decisive step. Leaving all worries behind, Kim Tae-hyung and Yan walk straight into the roaring abyss of blue flames with a slight smile. Those seeing them off shout words of encouragement after them, begging Kim Tae-hyung to take care of his companion. Yan herself is only amused by these worries, and she reacts with a smile to the crowd's excessive anxiety. Her eyes sparkle with anticipation, as she can't wait to finish this mission. Stepping through the roaring flames, they are instantly transported into a mysterious world shrouded in neon light. Yan looks around curiously, fascinated by the unusual scenery of this place. A colossal rift opens before them, pulsating with bright azure energy. The deep abyss seems to go into the very depths of the earth, beckoning with its unknown power. Dead trees loom ominously against the unnatural glow, creating an eerie atmosphere. Magical light streams through cracks in the rocks, pointing the way to the hidden threat. They find themselves on the very edge of the double dungeon of Apocalypto, a legendary and extremely dangerous place. The girl cautiously peers into the hole, warning her partner about a possible ambush below. But suddenly the ground disappears from under her feet, and a moment of confusion gives way to pure panic. Yan falls screaming into the darkening abyss, not having time to grab onto the edge. Kim Tae-hyung reacts instantly, rushing after him and drawing his trusty blade on the fly. The force of gravity quickly pulls him down, and the utmost concentration can be seen in his eyes. However, Yan quickly regains her composure, releasing a devastating green aura mid-flight. A confident, almost predatory smile appears on her face again. The fear has retreated, giving way to excitement. After all, at the very bottom, a nightmarish creature with a mouth full of sharp teeth is already waiting for them. Instead of panicking, hunters use the fall as an ideal opportunity for a surprise attack. Focusing all her fury and magical power on the monster, Yan is ready to deliver a devastating first blow. Kim Tae-hyung freezes in amazement, not believing his own eyes at what he sees. Enormous creatures mercilessly infest the gorge, but for this girl, they are just another target. Having accumulated an incredible concentration of magical energy, Yan makes a rapid dash forward. With one precise and crushing movement, she cuts through the flesh of terrifying monsters. The space around her literally explodes from the released emerald aura. The most dangerous monsters are blown to pieces by the onslaught of her unrivaled power. Watching this madness, the guy realizes how colossal the difference in their strength is. Tae-hyung realizes that he has fatally underestimated the true potential of this S-rank hunter until now. This realization only fuels his passion and desire to keep up with his partner. Daringly throwing himself into the thick of the battle, he rushes after her, ready to show what he is capable of. The echoes of the furious battle gradually fade away in the depths of this ominous rift. The battle is over, and with the battlefield littered with the bodies of fallen enemies, Yan finally catches her breath. Exhausted but surviving, Taehyung tries to assess the situation in this dark and deep dungeon. Looking over the mountains of fallen monsters, he wonders why the strongest monsters were destroyed so easily. Suddenly interrupting his thoughts, Yoo A-young calls her partner over with a slight smile. She reaches out and suddenly hands him a mysterious artifact shrouded in a dark haze. In his palm appears the legendary warrior ring, capable of granting incredible power. With her usual playful grin, the girl explains that this is only a small part of what awaits him. She promises even more generous rewards if he decides to finally join her guild. Taehyung is left wondering why such a valuable gift was not given to him before this deadly massacre began. Descending into the darkest depths of the dungeon, the companions find themselves amidst the remains of a recent brutal massacre. Before Yoo A-yeon can react, her ally walking ahead advises her to be extremely vigilant. Only Ricky Harley's enigmatic grin reveals that he understands the gravity of the threat hanging over them. Soon a majestic and terrifying hall opens before them, the true lair of the master of these forgotten lands. In the very center of the hall, captivating the frightened glances of the heroes, something otherworldly pulsates with an ancient, unbridled force. This gigantic egg, engulfed in mystical flames, seems about to reveal an indescribable nightmare to the world. The air literally crackles with the energy emanating from it, foreshadowing the birth of a monster of unprecedented power. Riki slowly reaches for the hilt of his blade, preparing for the inevitable and deadly collision. But before he can take a single step to explore, a ghostly silhouette materializes nearby, confusing him. A sudden deafening scream makes the guy freeze in complete bewilderment at the madness that is happening. Without waiting for plans or tactics, Yoo A-yeon quickly soars into the air, ready to unleash all her fury on her target. With a bold and confident smile on her face, she raises her fist, putting all her strength into this single blow. A destructive wave of pure energy shakes the entire dungeon with a roar, blinding with its primordial power. Ricky barely manages to stay on his feet, shielding himself from the deadly shrapnel and shockwave flying in all directions. As the dust begins to settle, he peers anxiously into the fog, hoping that his reckless partner has survived. From the clouds of smoke, a confident gaze of sparkling eyes, radiating unshakable calm, is directed at him. A completely unharmed Yoo A-yeon gives a slight smile as she makes a victory gesture with the source of the threat crushed in the background. All that remains of the once formidable artifact, capable of causing death, are pitiful, slowly fading fragments. A stunned Ricky can't believe his eyes as he watches how easily and casually this dangerous situation was resolved. The guy realizes that underestimating his companion's fighting potential would be his most fatal mistake in this adventure. But they barely have time to catch their breath when the mysterious artifact in the wall begins to crack menacingly, emitting a blinding azure light. The next moment, a powerful flash occurs, shaking the entire dungeon to its very foundations. A destructive wave of pure energy pierces the cave's vaults, causing centuries-old stones to crumble like hail. Trying to stay on their feet amidst rising clouds of dust, Ricky and Yoo A-yeon struggle to hold back the onslaught of the raging elements. From the very center of the energy storm, a majestic and frightening voice suddenly sounds out, disdaining the uninvited guests. Through the dissipating light before them, a shining divine creature begins to slowly descend. An ancient entity, shrouded in mystical flame, looks with obvious disdain at the pathetic attempts of people to defend themselves. At this moment, the legendary Blue Phoenix is born from the azure fire, spreading its gigantic wings. The hunters freeze in place, realizing that before them stands the true ruler of these forgotten depths. The heroes' faces show genuine horror. They understand that they are facing an enemy of a completely different level. The fiery whirlwind grows ever stronger, threatening to incinerate all living things in its path. Ricky clutches his weapon tightly, trying to figure out how to survive a battle with a monster that commands such devastating flames. Suddenly, the phoenix swoops down, unleashing the full fury of its divine might upon the adventurers. Shielding himself from the unbearable heat and blinding light with his hands, the guy is already preparing for the worst outcome. But at this critical moment, Yoo A-yeon decisively takes a step forward, ready to take the blow herself. Ricky looks at his companion with concern, not understanding where such reckless courage comes from. The girl makes a lightning-fast dash, releasing a colossal flow of her own power that literally tears apart the ground beneath her feet. The powerful shockwave from her attack throws the guy back, causing him to gasp from the resulting storm. Yoo A-yeon appears in all the glory of her formidable strength, and her eyes shine with an unwavering determination to see the fight through to the end. And as the dust slowly settles, a shocked Ricky can only silently look at his partner, re-evaluating her capabilities. The enemy, realizing the gravity of his situation, can only gnash his teeth in panic, preparing for the inevitable blow. And this blow falls upon him as a crushing wave of pure energy, literally knocking the ground out from under his feet. Choking in a cloud of rising dust, he desperately tries to maintain his balance, but the balance of power has already been irrevocably disrupted. Yoo A-yeon doesn't give him a second to breathe, concentrating her raging aura and fixing him with her icy, unwavering gaze. The next attack is even faster. A powerful stream of magic sends the enemy flying free. The enemy's face is frozen in genuine horror because he never expected to face such overwhelming superiority. Another blow interrupts his thoughts, cementing the triumph of the graceful warrior pursuing him. However, the battle is not over yet. In a desperate attempt to save himself, the enemy releases the remains of his dark, sinister energy. A terrifying bone guardian materializes from the crimson mist, ready to tear apart anyone who dares approach its creator. Realizing the stakes have risen, Riki reacts instantly, calling on his allies for help and directing his forces to support Yue Yon. The tension reaches its peak, causing every cell in his body to shake from the colossal pressure of someone else's magic. But Yue Yan only clenches her fist tighter, creating a sphere of blinding emerald light in her palm. And at that very moment, the battlefield is illuminated by a majestic azure phoenix, embodying primordial power and fury. As the flames die down, leaving behind only a scorched wasteland, the warrior calmly looks upon what she has done. Dust continues to fall on her shoulders, but not a shadow of fatigue is reflected on the girl's face, only cold calculation. In her bright blue eyes, glowing with a mystical fire, one can read a readiness to put a final point in this confrontation. Slowly lowering her hand, she feels an ancient weapon hidden under the rubble, bound with chains. With a soft ringing sound, the metal awakens, filling with purple discharges of destructive energy. The deadly chain rushes forward, cutting through the air like lightning. Biting into the stone slabs, the weapon secures the final victory, leaving the enemy no chance of salvation. The shackles mercilessly squeeze Yoshikawa Surara's body, depriving her of any ability to move. Electric shocks pierce the air, and the bonds squeeze her throat, threatening to cut off her breath at any moment. Before her eyes appears only a picture of destruction and chaos, erasing the last hope of salvation. But at this hopeless moment, Riki Harley's appears on the battlefield with an unwavering grin on his face. Yoshikawa Surara resists the pressure with all her might, refusing to give in to her fate so easily. The young man raises a crushing stone spike, warning his ally of the inevitable pain. With a powerful and precise blow, he brings down all his strength on the chains that bind her, smashing them to pieces. The girl chokes on blood from the violent blast wave, barely able to withstand such a crushing release. Her exhausted body falls powerlessly onto the cold stone rubble. With a true madman's smile, Riki promises her that this ordeal will soon be behind her. However, a shadow of deep anxiety flashes for a moment in his own gaze. An ominous blue flame erupts from the depths of the ruins, heralding the arrival of a new deadly threat. Realizing that there is no time to think, the guy releases his stone armor, preparing to retreat. He carefully throws his rescued comrade onto his shoulders, sheltering her from the storm raging around her. Riki takes off, racing through clouds of dust and debris, blade in hand. He is filled with determination to get her out of this hell at any cost, despite the mortal danger. A monstrous, fiery explosion erupts behind them, wiping out all living things from the face of the earth. From this azure inferno rises a mad spirit of flame, mocking man's pitiful attempts to escape. The enraged monster rushes in pursuit, mockingly asking if the vaunted warrior is really afraid of battle. The monster's loud laughter echoes in the darkness as the ring of pursuit inexorably closes in on the fugitives. Riki Harley's grits his teeth, preparing to deliver a desperate blow and turn the tide of this hopeless confrontation. He unleashes his full power, unleashing a barrage of blades and binding golden chains on the enemy. But the fiery monster only smirked contemptuously, not sensing even the slightest threat. After all, a flame born in the abyss does not obey the laws of mere mortals. No matter how much the young man tried to cut through this azure flesh, the sacred fire only burned brighter. With a deafening crash, the vaunted chains shatter into tiny fragments, powerless before the pure elements. Riki realizes with horror that his best attack didn't leave even a scratch on the monster's body. The ancient guardian revels in his absolute invulnerability, towering over his fallen foe. A blazing sphere of concentrated rage contracts, ready to incinerate all living things around it. A devastating explosion of azure flame shakes the ancient vaults, turning the stone floor into boiling lava. Miraculously clinging to the rock, Riki hangs over the abyss of fire, barely catching his breath from the unbearable heat. He is amazed not only by the enemy's destructive power, but also by his truly insane, instant regeneration. This creation surpasses any description of ordinary monsters that the young man had encountered before. A terrible guess makes his heart clench with a chilling premonition of imminent death. What rose before him was not just a beast, but the Grand Phoenix, a legendary disaster capable of wiping out entire cities. This creature cannot be defeated with conventional techniques, because any wound on its body heals faster than blood can be spilled. There remains only one deadly trump card that can turn the tide of battle, Predator Mode. But this forbidden power is too unstable and can devour the mind of its owner from the inside at any moment. And yet, without this insane risk, he has no chance of getting out of this fiery trap alive. Tensions reach a breaking point as Riki, bleeding, hesitates before making his final choice. Strong golden chains instantly bind the bodies of Riki and Yoshikawa Surara, firmly binding them to the rock face. Finding herself trapped, the girl realizes in horror that the bonds have completely restricted her movements and blocked her mana. At that very moment, an enraged spirit of blue flame rushes towards them straight from the raging flame. Riki screams desperately, trying to force the chains that bind them apart, but they only squeeze their bodies tighter. Time runs out inexorably, as a vortex of otherworldly energy draws them deeper into the deadly abyss. The young man struggles to reach his weapon, realizing that hesitation now would mean instant death. Suddenly, the space above them trembles, and primal fear is reflected in the eyes of their partners. A devastating explosion of colossal power shakes the cave, threatening to bury them under tons of rubble. The embodiment of raging flame looks down on them, reveling in its absolute power and superiority. The monstrous monster grins, confident that the pathetic humans have already resigned themselves to their inevitable fate. But instead of submission, a dark blade whistles through the air, breaking the usual course of the battle. Following him comes a crushing blow from a fist charged with poisonous green energy. Having thrown off their shackles, Riki and Yoshikawa Surara simultaneously launch a counterattack, combining their forces. Clutching a red-hot chain in his hands, Riki rushes forward in a rage, ready to crush the barrier. Yoshikawa's eyes glow an ominous green as she unleashes all her pent-up rage. Their swift onslaught catches the ancient beast off guard, causing it to stagger from the unexpected blow. The fire tyrant cannot believe his own eyes, amazed by the audacity of those he considered easy prey. How dare these mortals not only survive, but even dare to impose their own fight on him? With a wild roar, the monster unleashes a new, even more devastating wave of blue flame upon them. However, this deadly barrage only further fuels the hero's determination to stand firm until the very end. At this critical moment, Riki Harless activates Heart of the Monarch, greatly enhancing the abilities of every ally. Feeling a colossal surge of power, Lim Ayoung confidently prepares to take the next blow. Clenching her fists, she forces the surging energy around her to submit to her unwavering will. A blinding stream of pure mana roars through the curtain of flame. The warrior raises her shining spear, ready to unleash all her accumulated power on the enemy. Taken aback by such a counterattack, the monster freezes in a moment of confusion. Even Riki himself is amazed at the incredible power they have managed to awaken. But Lim Ayan only cold-bloodedly orders his comrades to retreat, taking the entire fight upon himself. A smile of anticipation, a dangerous one, like that of a born hunter, spreads across her face. Enveloped in emerald flame, she walks with a firm gait towards her goal. At this moment, the spirit of the Amazon awakens, plunging the girl into a state of absolute berserker madness. With a wild roar, she rushes forward, unleashing a colossal barrage of released mana on the monster. And even if such overexertion threatens irreparable harm to her body, it doesn't matter now. One furious attack makes reality itself tremble under the onslaught of this uncontrollable force. The spear tip mercilessly pierces the enemy's raging blue flame. The space explodes with a deafening cry of pain from a wounded monster. Without wasting a second, Lim Ayoung throws away his weapon and rushes into hand-to-hand combat. Her fists, charged with pure fury, crush the beast's dense energy armor. Unrivaled speed leaves the enemy no chance to counterattack or defend. Leaving behind only a trail of destruction, she proves that in this battle, there will be no mercy for anyone. A powerful explosion shakes everything around, releasing colossal energy and turning the battlefield into a living hell. Dust and rock debris rise into the air, obscuring the true impact of this devastating collision. Amidst the clouds of smoke, Yoshikawa Surara can barely stay on his feet, breathing heavily after such a grueling attack. Her body is at its limit, and the remnants of her magical aura are slowly leaving the wounded but not broken warrior. Her eyes, which had been burning with determination just a moment ago, now reflected only the sudden realization of the inevitable. The girl's strength finally leaves her, and she collapses unconscious onto the cold, lifeless ground. However, the seemingly defeated monster rises again from the ashes, emitting a furious and piercing cry. Insulted by the fact that they dared to throw him to the ground, the beast bursts into an even more ferocious blue flame. Thirsting for cruel revenge, he rushes down, ready to wipe his defenseless rival from the face of the earth forever. But at the most critical moment, space is pierced by dazzling golden chains of purest energy. An ancient spell immobilizes the enraged monster, preventing it from taking any step. The fire beast freezes in silent shock, realizing that a force of an entirely different level has intervened in this game. From the shadows comes the chilling grin of someone who is used to being in control of any situation. Li Zhongjae, carefully holding his rescued ally in his arms, looks down on his fallen enemy, reminding him of the importance of the final blow. Meanwhile, on the other side of the gate, in the safe zone, a mysterious glow from the portal begins to flare up. The hunters remaining outside eagerly await news, sincerely hoping for a successful outcome to this dangerous mission. They could not even imagine the madness that their comrades had to endure in the depths of this damned dungeon. Suddenly, a vortex of blue energy thickens, heralding the return of survivors from the very epicenter of the battle. The hunters immediately rush to meet him, bombarding their leader with worried questions about Surara's injuries and condition. But Li Zhongjae himself only freezes silently, his gaze fixed on the distance, as if sensing a new threat. As if to confirm these thoughts, a figure appears from the shining depths of the open gates, carefully carrying a wounded companion. The long-awaited news of the Firelink Shrine's clearing spreads everywhere in an instant, but the heroes' faces remain deathly tired. However, the real storm breaks out not on the battlefield, but in the vastness of the internet, where absurd rumors about their secret meeting instantly flare up. The internet is abuzz with rumors about an unexpected romance between Kim Taehyung and Yue Yeon, with the wildest theories being floated. Yue Yeon herself, reading these screaming headlines right from her hospital bed, blushes deeply from embarrassment and anger. And at that very moment, uninvited guests timidly enter her room, representatives of the association, not knowing where to look. They hesitate at the threshold, trying to find the right words and test the waters before an important conversation. Starting from afar, the visitors carefully try to hint at the undesirability of such rumors for the guild's reputation. Trying to justify themselves, they claim that they only wanted to protect the privacy of their strongest hunters. But their awkward questions and attempts to interfere in other people's affairs finally take the situation out of control. Instead of the expected anger, Yue Yeon only laughs loudly and sincerely at the absurdity of their suspicions. But the fun is interrupted when the door to the ward bursts open and a stern leader with an eye patch appears on the threshold. His menacing appearance and icy tone instantly silence everyone present. However, Yue Yan's patience comes to an end. A powerful surge of her true power instantly shatters the chamber into pieces, sending the advisors flying. Leaving the devastation behind, she calmly strolls through the hospital courtyard, accompanied by a silent and shocked leader. The man tries to smooth things over, making forced jokes and discussing her incredible potential, which she is able to maintain even in this state. The girl just listens to his speech in silence, leisurely sipping her drink and looking at her interlocutor with undisguised skepticism. There is a dangerous determination in her gaze. She understands perfectly well what game those in power are playing. After all, behind her fragile shoulders slumbers the colossal, almost divine power of an ancient spirit, capable of incinerating any enemy. And, while Ricky Harless says goodbye carefree, leaving all the worries to her, Yue Yan is just preparing for a new, much more dangerous battle. The veteran looks anxiously at the reports, amazed by the unprecedented speed of development of the young hunter. Meanwhile, his young ally just sips his drink silently, trying to grasp the scale of what is happening. The stunning news makes the old warrior doubt the reality of his own eyes. After all, Kim Tae-young is rapidly surpassing one limit after another, leaving behind the greatest masters of the past. His power flares up into a furious flame, ready to incinerate any obstacles on the way to the top. The commander is perplexed as to what great purpose the boy is so desperately torturing himself for, striving for absolute power. But those who stood shoulder to shoulder with him have no doubt about his frightening determination. They understand perfectly well that a storm is approaching, which only a true monster can cope with. The veteran fighter speaks with inspiration about a new era, where the strength of Kim Tae-hyung will become a reliable shield for all of humanity, an era in which one single person can stand between a dying world and hordes of nightmarish creatures. Having realized this, the veteran regains his former confidence and is ready to personally lead the troops forward. However, in another dimension, hidden from human eyes, there hovers an ominous castle, surrounded by loyal dragons. Here, in the throne room, strewn with the bodies of fallen defenders, the fate of an entire kingdom is decided. No one managed to survive the onslaught of the ruthless invaders, who did not spare even the elite guards. Blood stained the sacred slabs, silently testifying to the fall of a once great dynasty. The defeated scout bows before his new master, trembling with all-consuming fear. Through his trembling, he tries to convey the message of what a colossal threat has awakened in the human world. The king sits majestically on his dark throne, listening with disdain to the report of the bowed servant. His arrogant smirk and chilling gaze betray absolute confidence in his superiority. And while the messenger begs for mercy at the foot of the throne, the vampire lord is already anticipating a quick and bloody meeting with the new human god. The last breath of the unfortunate messenger is carried away, leaving behind only a ringing silence. At this moment, the mysterious warrior slowly reaches for his hood, ready to reveal his true face to the world. The darkness recedes, revealing the features of a man whose incomprehensible power will soon make the entire association tremble. Lee Jong-jae only smirks contemptuously, because he knows very well that at the pinnacle of power, there is always room for only one. Meanwhile, at the secret base, spatial gates open, leading into the most sinister depths of another world. Beyond the portal lies a scorched wasteland beneath the crimson sky of an eternal eclipse. This is the 22nd zone of the Abyss, a living hell where humanity struggles to hold on to at least a fragile outpost. Stepping onto the hot ground, Ricky Harless smiles and realizes that he has returned here for the first time since his regression. His sudden appearance at the gates of the Abyss immediately attracts the close attention of the guards. The local manager comes out to greet the guest, politely bowing in a perfect greeting. Behind his routine smile and polite tone lies the keen mind of an official accustomed to assessing the strength of arriving hunters. Together they head deeper into the base, surrounded by lifeless and frightening landscapes. The guide quickly brings the young man up to speed, persistently explaining the harsh local laws. After all, in this cursed place, the slightest carelessness instantly turns an ordinary walk into a bloody massacre. The manager advises him to immediately take refuge in a safe zone, but Ricky just calmly continues to move forward. Suddenly, right under their feet, there is a deafening and ominous cracking sound of the earth splitting. From the depths of the rift, a gigantic monster bursts forth with a furious roar, eager to tear the intruders to pieces. The conductor will retreat back in panic, paralyzed by terror in the face of imminent death. Mortal fear freezes in his eyes, because ordinary people are not capable of surviving in such a deadly trap. But before the dust has even settled on the ground, Ricky Harless is already standing calmly on the fallen carcass of the monster. Lee Jong-jae just smiles lightly, declaring that he is going to take a casual walk. However, under his feet there are already lifeless bodies of monsters, covering the bloody ground. Having passed through hordes of monsters, he leaves behind only mountains of lifeless flesh. Suddenly, his attention is drawn to a strange crystal, mysteriously shimmering in the semi-darkness. Shards of the mysterious stone slowly rise above his palm, emitting an otherworldly light. Lee Jong-jae clenches his fist, and at the same moment a crushing purple energy is released. From this furious flame, a terrible flaming skull rises with an ominous roar. The darkness takes shape, revealing to the world the skeletal hands of an ancient creature. Huge, sharp claws tear apart space itself, obeying the will of their new master. And so, right in front of him, a colossal gate, created from pure death magic, opens. A confident grin appears on his face. It's time to look beyond the unknown. Without a shadow of a doubt, the young man takes a decisive step towards the raging purple flame. His gaze is extremely focused because he is ready for any challenge that awaits him ahead. Crossing the threshold, he finds himself in front of a majestic castle, shrouded in the neon glow of an alien sky. A huge staircase goes far up, leading to the gates of this sinister but beautiful monastery. Gothic spires soar upwards, as if trying to pierce the endless clouds. The architecture of this place breathes with ancient magic and hides secrets that mortals did not even dare to guess. Lee Jung-jae stands frozen in amazement, struck by the enormity of the spectacle that greets his gaze. With every step he takes on the cold stone steps, the tension inside him only grows. He understands that the mysterious stone has led him to a place from which there will be no return. Suddenly, from the ominous darkness, as if woven from the fog itself, winged shadows silently appear behind his back. Feeling a chilling threat, Lee Jung-jae turns around abruptly, realizing that his presence has already been detected. At the same moment, a crushing blow tears apart space, turning the stone bridge into a pile of flying fragments. When the dust clears a little, the young man manages to group himself, tightly clutching his trusty weapon in his hand. He peers intently into the clouds of smoke, preparing to meet the enemy face to face. From the heavenly heights, 3 graceful but deadly dangerous figures slowly descend towards him. The predatory demonesses smile carnivorously, rejoicing at the uninvited guest who has wandered into their domain. Lee Jung-jae's gaze hardens as he instantly recognizes these floating maidens as treacherous succubi. The ancient legends were true. These creatures are capable of subjugating the mind of any man and mercilessly draining his life to the last drop. Finding himself on the edge of a hovering abyss, alone against 3 winged beasts, he realizes that there is nowhere to retreat. The monsters are amused by his hopeless situation, whispering and anticipating a quick, sweet victory. But instead of fear, rage flares up in the hero's soul. With a powerful push, he crushes the slabs under his feet and rushes upward. Like a shot arrow, Lee Jung-jae rises into the air, raising his blade for a deadly strike. Such a daring and lightning-fast attack takes the demonesses by surprise, causing them to be momentarily confused. A mad dance of blade and claws unfolds in the sky, where every move could be the last. Lee Jung-jae spins in a whirlwind of punches, desperately trying to catch her elusive opponents. However, the succubi only laugh mockingly, easily dodging his furious attacks and whetting their appetites. The elder of them makes a slight gesture with her hand, releasing a pink flame of mental magic. At that very moment, a heady flash of passion pierced Lee Jung-jae's mind, causing his will to waver. A blinding explosion of pink energy consumes everything around, threatening to dissolve his consciousness forever in a sweet nightmare. The demoness rushes into a swift attack, confident that her spell of passion will instantly break the will of the intruder. But the sweet shackles of illusion are shattered by the unwavering spirit of a hunter who has been through hundreds of deadly battles. At that very second, her seductive smile is replaced by a grimace of primal horror. With a powerful and precise blow, Lee Jung-jae unleashes all his fury on the impudent beast, leaving her no chance. Her battle sisters stand in silent shock, unable to believe that their strongest vanguard has been destroyed in mere moments. An ominous purple flame erupts around the hunter, calling upon death itself as a formidable ally. A cold grin of a predator appears on his face, realizing his absolute superiority on this battlefield. The summoned underworld giant unleashes a crushing blow on the remaining demonesses, crushing their resistance. The defeated and crippled servants of darkness can only moan helplessly on the cracked stone steps. A triumphant Lee Jung-jae accumulates the remains of his dark energy, ready to subjugate the surviving enemies. Walking slowly up the endless staircase, he leaves behind broken and trembling demons. Under his heavy, penetrating gaze, proud Rosaria is forced to helplessly clench her fists, admitting her defeat. Her body trembles from the invisible shackles of someone else's will, depriving her of the last drops of her former independence. The hunter extends his hand with a smile, confident that he will now have a loyal S-rank servant at his disposal. However, the next moment a system warning flashes before his eyes, causing his heart to skip a beat. The realization of a terrible mistake rolls through his body like an icy wave. In front of him is not at all the one with whom the contract was made. The sky above the gloomy cathedral opens up, and an entire army of true spawns of the abyss begins to descend to the earth. This armada is led by a majestic ruler, in whose blazing eyes one can read only condescending cruelty. The dark vaults of the cathedral are shrouded in a blood-red fog, blooming with ominous roses of nightmares. And in this garden of death, Lee Jung-jae reveals the terrible fate of those who tried to challenge the true mistress of this cursed place. The mutilated bodies of the unfortunate, entwined with the thorny stems of roses, hang silently from the ceiling like horrific trophies. At this time, in the very heart of the castle, a faithful servant hurries to appear before her mistress with important news. Through a web of roots and a bloody mist, she approaches the sacred bed, bearing news of the daring stranger. Behind the translucent canopy, she awakens whose whispers can drive any mortal mad. A lazy, predatory smile distorts Rosaria's face, anticipating some quick fun with the uninvited guest. Meanwhile, clouds gather over the hovering citadel, and thunderclaps shake the ancient walls. The forces of chaos are attacking the castle, turning the once impregnable stronghold into a trap for all who find themselves inside. Lee Jung-jae rushes through endless dark corridors, fleeing from a merciless pursuit. Hot on his heels fly bloodthirsty demonesses, eager to present living prey to their mistress. The guy understands that hesitation is akin to death, and his enemies are catching up with him with every moment. The creatures dive down on him from above, filling the vaults of the castle with a mad, triumphant squeal. Deadly claws rush towards their victim, ready to rend flesh and subjugate will. In an instant, Lee Jong-jae finds himself surrounded by tenacious wings and merciless paws. But at the most critical moment, a dark, destructive force awakens in his soul, surpassing any nightmare. A devastating burst of energy causes the demons to recoil in terror from their elusive prey. A powerful explosion tears through the space, breaking through the walls and smashing the castle's centuries-old slabs into splinters. The dust settles, revealing a huge gap in the floor, in the center of which an exhausted fighter stands frozen, barely breathing. Lee Jong-jae, catching his breath, tries to gather his strength for the final, decisive step. Overcoming his weakness, he approaches the massive gates behind which hides the one who commands this abode of sin. The demonic maiden bows her head in feigned submission, inviting him to enter and submit to the will of her mistress. Lee Jong-jae takes a deep breath, realizing there is no turning back. Behind these doors, the demon queen herself awaits him. Stepping onto the blood-red marble, he finds himself in an eerie garden where beauty is intertwined with pure madness. Everywhere, cocoons of vines hang like silent monuments, victims whose lives were drained to the last drop. Step by step, he approaches the center of the hall, from where ominous black whips spread like veins. There, hidden by a translucent veil, sits the one whose grandeur is more frightening than any army of monsters. Her alluring yet deadly smile makes your blood run cold. At that moment, a system notification popped up before his eyes, confirming the possibility of entering into a summoning oath with this entity. The demoness's silky, mesmerizing voice echoes through the darkness as she calls out her true name, Rosaria. Lee Jong-jae freezes in surprise, struck by the aura of superiority emanating from her. The realization that the greater demon is speaking pure human language takes him by surprise, causing her to only laugh playfully. Rosaria notes that there is nothing strange about this, since he himself is able to easily understand the language of the abyss. Slowly rocking on her throne, she asks slyly what exactly brought him to her secret chambers, a thirst for gold or glory. Or did he come for forbidden pleasures, succumbing to the vicious temptation that her abode so sweetly promises? But Lee Jong-jae maintains his composure, not allowing the treacherous words to cloud his judgment. He came here not as a petitioner, but as one who intended to force this formidable creature to submit. When the guy openly declares his intention to bind her with a contract, Rosaria cannot help but laugh arrogantly. Her mocking laughter fills the entire room, revealing sharp fangs and showing the absurdity of his insolent words. The very idea that a mortal has come to subjugate a higher demon seems to her the height of madness and unheard-of stupidity. However, her amusement instantly fades, replaced by predatory interest when she begins to part the veil. Having thrown off the veil of secrecy, Rosaria appears before him in all her frightening grandeur, ready to teach the impudent guest a cruel lesson. The succubi queen mockingly declares that she sees no point in contracts, as this impudent mortal will become her new favorite toy anyway. The next moment, the air is filled with a suffocating dark aura, and the space around is distorted by an extreme concentration of mana. However, Lee Jong-jae is not going to give up so easily, and calls on his ghostly protector for help. Enveloped in the purple flame of an afterlife, the boy declares his readiness to fight back against the ancient entity. A firm promise escapes his lips to break the pride of the mistress of the abyss and force her to submit to his will. In response to these bold words, deadly shadow spikes rush towards the hero. Deftly evading the swift attacks, Lee Jong-jae begins his deadly dance among the collapsing columns. But Rosaria's power exceeds all his expectations, and another crushing wave almost knocks the guy off his feet. Then the flaming shackles of his stone guard come into play, designed to hold back the onslaught of the raging darkness. Using all available power, the hunter rushes straight through the barrage of enemy blows. Each of his steps shakes the very earth, concentrating colossal energy for the decisive thrust. Soaring high into the air, he makes a desperate leap towards the throne, trying to reach the Archduchess herself. His blades cut through space, ready to end this battle with one precise hit. But a barrier of pure mana easily crushes his summoned guardian, turning the solid stone into dust. A powerful explosion throws the guy back, causing him to lose his balance in the air. The fiery chains shatter into tiny fragments, and with them the last hopes for an easy victory collapse. Breathing heavily from exhaustion, Lee Jong-jae realizes how deep the gap is between his strength and that of a true demon. Meanwhile, Rosaria only lazily watches his fruitless attempts, amused by the sight of his despair. With one light movement of her fingers, she concentrates reality-distorting magic around herself. And now the hunter finds himself face to face with the inevitable end of this crazy duel. Lee Jong-jae tries to maintain control until the very end, raising his blade for a desperate strike. But the ground slips away from under my feet, giving way to the chilling horror of freefall. The vast metropolis rapidly recedes as monstrous tentacles pull it into the abyss of Rosaria's illusion. Fingers slide helplessly along the invisible barrier, not finding the slightest support. The hunter realizes that the rules of the game have changed, and the laws of physics no longer apply. Finally falling down, he flies through the endless emptiness of the ghostly city. A sudden blow, and Lee Jong-jae's body plunges headlong into the raging icy depths. Water fills the lungs, tearing a cry of impotent rage from the chest. And far in the sky, above the raging ocean of reason, the bed of the insidious demoness hovers serenely. Rosaria watches her victim's torment with obvious pleasure, chuckling quietly. Her predatory smile reveals sharp fangs, foreshadowing the imminent and inevitable death of her prey. Hollow. After all, in reality, the hunter has long been caught in her deadly embrace. Li Zhongjae lies unconscious, completely subjugated to the will of his tormentor. The space around them is filled with an ominous scarlet glow, cementing the demon's triumph. He is trapped in his own mind, where the line between sleep and reality has completely blurred. The succubus's sweet whisper penetrates his consciousness, depriving him of the last strength to resist. All this time he was in her complete power from the very first step. But the illusion is merciless, and his astral body continues to sink to the very bottom of the black abyss. Through the thickness of the water, Li Zhongjae tries to convince himself that this whole nightmare is just a deception of the senses. However, the chilling reality of what is happening makes his eyes widen in wild horror. Li Zhongjae's eyes widen to find himself in the backseat of a speeding car. Confused and disoriented, he frantically tries to understand how he ended up in this strange place. The guy's gaze falls on the child sitting next to him, whose face seems painfully familiar to him. Little Kim Taeyong is enthusiastically telling his parents something, clenching his fists in delight. His eyes shine with genuine childish sincerity and faith in a bright future. The woman sitting in front turns around tenderly, praising her beloved son. Her soft voice is filled with boundless maternal pride that warms the soul. Li Zhongjae silently watches this alien family idyll, feeling like an invisible ghost. The space around is filled with carefree laughter and warm, almost tangible memories. For a moment, this peace lulls his mind, making him believe for a second in the reality of what is happening. But a sudden flash of fear brings him back to reality, causing his heart to pound wildly. In 1 second, the peaceful illusion collapses, and the car's interior is instantly engulfed in a furious flame. The father leans lifelessly over the steering wheel, covered in soot and blood. The mother freezes in the front seat, silently disappearing into the wall of merciless fire. Li Zhongjae panics and tries to escape, choking on the acrid smoke and stifling heat. Through the broken glass, he notices silhouettes receding on the night road. An elderly couple carries the wounded Kim Taeyong away from the blazing inferno, saving his life. The boy tries in vain to scream, but the smoke clogs his lungs, making it impossible for him to make any sounds. The realization that he is trapped in someone else's tragic past paralyzes his will. And in the distance, behind a veil of smoke, those who cold-bloodedly orchestrated this catastrophe stand indifferently. The cruel reality knocks him off his feet, forcing him to choke on his own helplessness under mocking glances. He sees himself broken, sobbing on his knees before the burning ruins of his former life. This memory leads him further, to those days when the survivors tried to find at least some way to salvation. Every step was taken with difficulty, through sweat, tears, and endless fatigue that erased the human form. Cody Wood watched silently as his comrades' hopes crumbled, unable to offer them any comfort. All around, only the cries of despair were heard from those from whom a merciless fate had taken away what was most precious. Trying to protect his loved ones from the inevitable, one of the survivors said goodbye to his family on a snowy street. He stubbornly refused to believe the worst, trying to appear stronger than he actually was. And his family only watched him go with silent horror, realizing that this meeting could be their last. Cody saw this farewell and knew that only merciless darkness lay ahead. On this cold day, a conversation began between them that predetermined a tragic ending. But despite the chilling fear, they made their choice and stepped into the unknown. At that time, they did not yet know that their every action was being closely watched by an ancient demonic evil in the person of Rosaria. Cody Wood found himself caught in a ruthless game where any mistake cost him his life. And retribution was not long in coming. A bloody madness engulfed their camp, sparing no one in its path. Those who just a moment ago had hoped for salvation died in agony, tearing the silence with piercing screams. In a matter of minutes, the blossoming hopes turned into a silent cemetery strewn with the bodies of the fallen. The earth was soaked with the blood of those who simply wanted to survive in this crazy, cruel world. Rosaria watched this bloodbath from the sidelines with only a slight, mocking smile. And even the great demon lord did not hide his surprise that someone managed to stay alive in this hell. Rosaria pointed with obvious disdain at the man who dared to disturb the peace of these dead lands. The alien himself seemed to be on the verge of madness from the mere realization of where fate had brought him. Fragments of old, painful memories of the old days when he was just a weak victim came rushing through his mind, about the days when fear paralyzed his body, and the cruelty of those around him forced him to lower his eyes in impotent rage. The demoness was only anticipating some light fun, gracefully wagging her tail in front of her frightened prey. But suddenly the air shook with a crushing blow as an unknown menacing force awoke in the darkness. The protective barrier shattered into thousands of glittering fragments, revealing the demon's true vulnerability. A spark of primordial horror flashed in Rosaria's eyes, which had previously been full of arrogance. From the shining depths of the heavenly rift, emitting a blinding divine light, the king slowly descended. His faceless, majestic silhouette suppressed any will to resist with just his incomprehensible aura. Realizing the mortal danger, Rosaria began to run, saving her life from the approaching shadow of greatness. But a barely noticeable, merciless grin played across the ancient creature's face, promising her no mercy. Cold sweat filled the demoness's eyes as she realized that it was impossible to hide from this gaze. Blinding bolts of crimson lightning struck her in an instant, piercing the very core of her demonic being. Unable to withstand the crushing divine power, she fell to her knees, bleeding and choking with pain. The life force was rapidly leaving her body, leaving only pitiful wheezing in the dead silence. All her former power dissolved, defeated by a force superior to any demonic laws. But at that very moment, when death seemed inevitable, steel flashed silently behind her. A cold blade, belonging to Cody Wood, was pressed against her throat, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. With a mad grin on his lips and breathing heavily, this ruthless hunter secured his triumph over his fallen enemy. Meanwhile, Rosaria, freed from the shackles of the previous fight, directed her predatory gaze at a new target. Lee Jung-jae immediately felt a cold sweat run down his back, foreshadowing imminent danger. The demoness's sly smile left no doubt she had already chosen her next toy. A second's flash, and her obedient whips rushed forward with a whistle, cutting through the air. Before the guy could do anything, he found himself completely at her mercy, helplessly frozen in the air. Coming close to her victim, Rosaria mercilessly sank her fangs into his neck. A cry of pain and despair escaped Lee Jong-jae's chest as the monstrous poison began to course through his veins. His strength instantly left him, and his limp body fell heavily onto the cold ground. Having lost consciousness, he remained lying motionless, completely immersed in the darkness of oblivion. And above him, triumphant over her easy victory, towered the demoness, whose flaming eyes promised death to anyone who dared to stand in her way.